Chapter 1. The Heart-Wrenching Betrayal Night. Under the starry sky of Cloud Fall Mountain's summit, the cool breeze blew gently, and all was still. Su Luo's gentle eyes carried a hint of happiness as she tenderly stared at the man before her eyes. Yun Qi, as soon as I quit the organization, we'll settle down here, okay? Yun Qi's sharp eyebrows and sparkling eyes brought about an intoxicating tenderness. Girl, you're going to quit just like that? Su Luo turned around to overlook the distant night sky, then turned around wearing a beautifully bright smile. In these past 10 or so years, if I wasn't training, I'd be killing while always on the verge of life and death. There wasn't even a peaceful day. Now I'm already weary of this kind of lifestyle, so I want to hurry up and break away from it. Don't tell me that you don't think the same? While speaking, Su Luo took out a small brocade box and waved it in front of Yun Qi. Guess what's in here? Su Luo's eyes sparkled as her expression filled with happiness. Immersed in the future beautiful life she yearned for, she did not see a treacherous radiance flash in Yun Qi's eyes. The dragon ring? So you've already gotten a hold of it? How could it be possible? When did this happen? Yun Qi's upturned eyes narrowed with an intoxicating gentleness. Right when you were still on your mission in the West, I was lucky, so I got it. So now, you'll quit with me, okay? Su Luo held Yun Qi's hand with hopeful eyes. After returning the dragon ring to the organization, we'll then settle down here and happily live our lives here, okay? All right. He gently kissed Su Luo's smooth forehead and forcefully held her within his bosom as he tightly embraced her. As she nestled on his collarbone, Su Luo closed her eyes and blissfully smiled. They were childhood sweethearts of 10 or so years who had hand in hand walked through a hail of bullets. He was her most important family member, and also the person she trusted the most. She has already conceived his baby now, so once they quit the organization. All of a sudden, Su Luo's entire body stiffened as her confused eyes filled with bitter pain. She opened her eyes wide with incredulous despair. She pushed Yun Qi away and looked down. A sharp dagger had pierced through her chest. As blood unceasing flowed out from the dagger to wet the thin white skirt, the blood spilling out from the chest was similar a red spider lily in full bloom. Passionate yet strange. As an assassin, the accuracy of Yun Qi's dagger did not have the slightest trace of error. Su Luo stumbled to kneel on the ground filled with unorderly crushed rocks, as her beautiful eyes brimmed with surprised despair and disbelief. She honestly did not think that the man she trusted the most, who claimed that he loved her, would ruthlessly send her a dagger as her birthday present and stab her in the back. The execution was emotionless and relentless. Why? She opened her mouth, but could not utter a single sound because of her despair. Yun Qi coldly ridiculed her as the corner of his mouth curled up. Su Luo, you're an absolute idiot. You know too many of the organization's secrets. Did you really think that the organization would let you off? And to even think about quitting, you're too naive. Not only that, you're so naive that you would believe that I'd actually quit with you? Su Luo bitterly smiled in despair. As per Yun Qi's words, she really was too naive to actually believe that he would quit the organization with her. Don't be this stupid in your next life. Yun Qi picked up the small brocade box that fell on the floor. After coldly glancing at the hopelessly suffering Su Luo, he turned around decidedly left. Yun Qi, are you sure you're not too naive? Su Luo's cold voice resounded behind his back. Yun Qi halted in his steps as Su Luo suddenly laughed out loud. What did you think was in that brocade box? Yun Qi opened the brocade box, and his complexion suddenly changed. Where's the dragon ring? Where do you hide it? There was a wealthy employer who put forth $3 billion and entrusted the organization to look for this dragon ring. If it could not be found in the end, not only would they not receive the money, the organization's reputation would also be severely tarnished. Su Luo stood on the edge of the steep cliff and looked down at the deep darkness. The corner of her mouth revealed a satisfied yet bleak smile that was as beautiful as the unstable blooming of a queen of the night. Yun Qi, you'll never be able to obtain the dragon ring. Also, don't bother to cry at my tombstone, or else you'll taint my reincarnation cycle. While speaking, Su Luo abruptly leapt and her entire person plunged down into the darkness of the cliff. And beneath the cliff were raging waves of seawater that beat against the shore. Chapter 2. This is simply torture. Time and space converted. Blue sky continent. Pain. Su Luo felt a needle-like pain throughout her entire body, as if she had been run over by a heavy truck. It was so painful that her heart had almost stopped beating. In a daze, she slowly opened her heavy eyelids. Seeing the dirty white gauze mosquito net above her head and a shabby quilt, she momentarily could not react. Su Luo, you cheap slut, why aren't you dead yet? Why did you even bother to wake up? Die die die. A sharp, ear-piercing voice furiously shouted near Su Luo's bed. Su Luo realized that she was strengthless from head to toe. She weakly turned towards the direction of the voice. There was a beautiful girl who looked to be around 14 or 15 years of age, dressed in light purple fine gauze. Inserted in her hair that was rolled up in a bun was a precious butterfly hairpin and a jade hairpin. Her small face was slightly round, and she had very delicate facial features. The little girl was very beautiful, yet she was very malicious in her actions. At the moment, she was holding a needle that was usually used to sew the soles of a shoe. The needle was thick and glinted in the cold light. With a sinister look in her eyes, she ruthlessly stabbed at Su Luo's body. She stabbed at the flesh hidden underneath the clothes, so unless someone tore them open, outsiders would never be able to see them. So painful. This is simply torture. Su Luo wanted to say something, but discovered that her mouth had been gagged by a rag. She wanted to resist, but found out that she didn't even have the strength to lift a single finger. Seeing that Su Luo had awoken, the malicious girl turned to face the other slightly larger girl and coldly commanded, "Third sister, quickly beat her to death." Subsequently, this third miss did what she was told and forcefully swung the palm of her hand to slap Su Luo's face. Su Luo's eyes gleamed with a frosty light. This maltreatment, these slaps. Su Luo will remember all of them. Su Luo could no longer take the continuous assault, and finally sank into the darkness. Miss you must not die." The sound of the young female's mournful weeping was miserable, and it seemed that her throat had become hoarse due to her weeping. Awakened by the sound of weeping and feeling that someone was forcefully shaking her, Su Luo faintly woke up. And Miss Lu Luo, who was sadly weeping, raised her gaze and met Su Luo's line of sight. Accompanied by the eye contact, her face immediately turned to that of pleasant surprise. At this time, Su Luo also clearly saw the little girl before her eyes. She was approximately 14 or 15 years of age with facial features that could be considered to be graceful. But at the moment, her face was covered with red and swollen fingerprints. Both eyes swelled like a peach, and she appeared to be in a tight spot. Her vision shifted to the interior of the room. She discovered that the table was missing a leg, the chair was worn out, and there wasn't even a cup to drink water from the teapot. It seemed as if the entire room was a house in the slums of Africa. Suddenly, Su Luo's mind ached as memories flooded in like the surging of the tide. Looks like she really did cross over. This place was not a dynasty that she was familiar with, for was the blue sky continent that never appeared in China's history, and was a world that respected those with martial might. The continent consisted of 4 countries. They were individually named Eastern Ling, Western Jin, Southern Feng, and Northern Emo together. The 4 countries drew a circle, and in between them was the legendary dark forest that was rampant with magic beasts. Unless one was a martial artist, entering was simply unthinkable. As of now, Su Luo was in the manor of the Eastern Ling Empire's great general. Her father was Su Zian, the great general who protected the empire, and she was the publicly known strawbag fool of an idiot, the good-for-nothing 4th Mississippi. In the blue sky continent, every child had to take an innate talent test at the age of 5, and this exam was so important that it was enough to determine a person's entire life. Before this exam, Su Luo was the pride of the Su family because during her birth, even the heavens intervened with worldly phenomenons. A multicolored sky paved the roads in rainbow as a divine bird circled around the entire imperial capital. At that time, everyone believed that Su family's 4th miss would become someone of importance. But on the day of the aptitude test 5 years later, this Su family's 4th miss, who most had the greatest of expectations for, unexpectedly appeared to be nobody. Her innate talent was at a good-for-nothing zero, and it was fundamentally impossible for her to practice martial arts. As a result of the expectations being too high with the disparity too wide, Su Zian threw Su Luo into the side courtyard under a fit of rage, leaving Su Luo to decide her own life and death. Su Luo's mother had also been abandoned and finally perished from depression. Chapter 3. I'll definitely kill her next time. Could it be that she really was the legendary good-for-nothing? Su Luo gazed at the slow-moving white cloud as a trace of a grim smile flashed in her eyes. During the modern age, Su Luo had experienced 10 or so years of the devil's training. Even if her innate talent was zero, she could still break through and a piece of the sky would one day be hers. She still recalled what had happened the day she crossed over, that scene of the two girls torturing her. Miss, Third Miss and Fifth Miss are taking a stroll in the gardens. The two did not bring any maids, and I do not know what they are discussing. Lu Luo entered carrying a small box, placed it on the table, and took out the dishes one by one to arrange them on the table. A plate of rotting vegetable leaves, a bowl of molding dried tofu, and 2 bowls of rice. Not eating, I'm stepping out first. Su Luo pushed away the bowl and chopsticks as a hint of coldness flashed through her eyes. Su Luo had no skill aside from her love of holding grudges. And if a grudge existed, it most certainly must be avenged. Inside the flower garden, Third Miss Su Wan and Fifth Miss Su Shi strolled along the lotus pond. Fifth Miss Su Shi was born from the first wife, so her status was high. Her innate talent had also astonished many at a young age. She was the darling of the entire Su family. Like Su Luo, Third Miss Su Wan was born from a mistress, but her mouth was sweet, and she usually used it to fawn over Su Shi. She gave priority to Su Shi, so the two appeared to have quite a good relationship. A faint sound came from Su Wan. Fifth younger sister, I heard that damned girl woke up again? Su Shi sneered. Her life is so cheap, but when poisoned, she wasn't poisoned to death, and when beaten, she wasn't beaten to dead. How hateful. Su Wan asked again. Then what do we do? Doesn't it mean that the marriage is still? Su Shi fiercely fisted. Don't you worry, I'll definitely kill her next time. At the moment, they were walking along the lotus pond. Su Shi walked along the inside, while Su Wan walked on the outer side. Su Luo held a stalk of rice straw in her mouth, as she listened in to their discussion that plotted against her life. A glimmer of coldness flashed through her eyes. She'd like to see who would dare mess with her again. I heard that Su Shi's innate talent was extremely high, and was already at the second step of the warrior. Although she did not have the ability to take her revenge now, collecting a little bit of interest was no problem at all. Su Luo hid behind the parasol tree as her eyes slyly gleamed. With a whip of her sleeve, a small pebble coincidentally tumbled near Su Wan's foot. Su Wan faced forward. So why would she take into account what was underneath her foot? She took a step and her balance immediately became unstable as she swayed in Su Shi's direction. When one was about to fall, they would inevitably activate their instinct of grabbing anything near them that they could possibly hold on to, and Su Wan was fortunate enough to firmly grasp at Su Shi's sleeve. What was quite unfortunate was when the two stumbled and tried to regain their balance. A shadowless foot suddenly kicked Su Wan in the buttocks. The assault that came out of the blue took Su Wan by surprise, so she once again firmly grabbed onto Su Shi's dress. Suddenly, the pair flew towards the canal with a bang, and heavily fell in while looking like drowned rats. As for Su Luo, she had already returned to hide behind the parasol tree with both hands clutching her chest as her eyes flowed with bright lights and vibrant colors. She waited there to watch the good show. She wanted to see how marvelous the internal conflict between two close collaborators would be. In this unexpected accident, Su Shi was actually an innocent bystander. But who told her to stubbornly want to offend the Su Luo, who should never be offended? She had been dragged in by Su Wan, and plunged head first into the water. Her disposition was originally that of a pampered child, so she immediately shouted in anger and swung her hand. Third elder sister, what are you doing? Slipping and falling on your own is fine, but why do you have to drag me in with you? Chapter 4. A wicked person shall be harassed by one of the same kind. Su Wan surfaced with great difficulty, and what greeted her was a heavy slap from Sushi. Suwon was indeed innocent, and she did not understand how she had slipped and fallen. But she was certain that she fell into the canal, because someone had ruthlessly kicked her bottom. Suwon tightly held onto the right cheek that had been slapped and cried without tears. Fifth younger sister. It's not that I wanted to fall, someone kicked me. Sushi sneered. We're the only two here. Who did you think kicked you? Why haven't you gone up there and given me a cloak to wear? But Suwon miserably lowered her eyelids. The gauze fairy robe was now tightly plastered on her body, and her figure was clearly displayed in such fine detail that her inner red undergarments were distinctly seen. If she went out like this and was seen by someone, wouldn't she lose too much face? How about we call for someone? Suwon weakly proposed after thinking for quite a while as she held her head. No. If a man answered our call, what will we ever do if we've been completely seen? Go quickly. Sushi had cruelty written all over her face. And no. Suwon desperately shook her head and refused to agree no matter what. Then strip off your clothes and give them to me for me to wear. Sushi panted with rage and started to pull at Suwon's outer clothing. Fifth little sister, stop, please stop. Suwon tightly hugged her stomach, as if she was unwilling to let go even if she died. She only had one layer of outer gauze and inside that were her undergarments. Then why don't you hurry and go? Sushi relentlessly pushed Suwon in the direction of land. The Suwon standing ashore with her clothes plastered all over her body, had her two little grapes blown by the wind. They immediately became erect by the wind, as if they were arrogant warlords. She shivered due to the cold, and ran as if her life depended on it. However, at the same time, it was not known why but the trees suddenly ignited in flames. Distant cries sounded out. Fire! The trees are on fire. Quickly, we must extinguish the fire. The little grove just happened to be near the lotus pond. Its surroundings were obvious at a glance. There were no fake hills or fake stones. It was fundamentally impossible to take cover. Soon after, a countless number of people bounded in that direction. Scared out of her wits, Suwon paled as both of her hands protected her chest and quickly spun around in place. Run! Run quickly! Sushi loudly urged from within the lotus pond. If you don't run now, it'll be too late. But it was already too late now. The sound of numerous footsteps closing in was heard afterwards. Suwon trembled in fright, and she subconsciously went in the direction of the canal to jump in once more. With a bang, the splashing of waves rose high in the air. Luo almost laughed out loud. But this decision of Suwon's shouldn't be considered to be foolish. After all, the pond's water wasn't deep, and one could stand in it with both legs. Not only that, within the pond bloomed many water lilies. If they hid behind them, if one wasn't seriously trying to find them there, it was extremely unlikely for others to discover them. Why did you come in again? Sushi raged so hard that her hair almost stood up on end. She swung heavily to slap at Suwon's face. Suwon was also unhappy. Fifth little sister, don't be so unreasonable. She should also be a little angry, right? Sushi viciously glared. Unreasonable? Who's unreasonable? If you didn't drag me in here, would I be in this situation? You. Keep this in mind, once I get out, I'll definitely will not let you off. But I didn't do it on purpose, someone really did push me in. Who pushed you? I'd like you to bring them out for me to see. Ignoring the numerous footsteps, the two sisters started to immediately quarrel in the canal. With an evil smile, Luo coldly watched this hard-to-come-by show of the two sisters' savage fight. She looked forward to what would follow next on this program, for it would certainly be marvelous. Only then would it not waste the fire that she had run to set. Chapter 5. The impeccably handsome youngster attired in white clothing, Nangong Luyan leisurely sat at a place not too far from the lotus pond's lush trees. His beautiful face slightly curled up into a curve as his intelligent eyes brimmed with overflowing interest. 100% interest. It seems like today's visit to the great general's manor was indeed not a bad decision. Chancing upon this sort of show was actually unexpected. He was never aware of the fact that the great general's daughters were so amusing. The rumored stupid idiot was actually this quick-witted and clever. And the one who was typically praised to the skies had been reduced to such a state. Nangong Liuyan's gaze traveled towards Su Luo's direction and rubbed at his bright and clean chin in interest. This girl was so young, but her mind was extremely clever to produce such a crafty scheme. Her skills were pretty good to look at too. As for her appearance, Nangong Liuyan examined this girl in detail. No more than 14 or 15, with a careless smile on her face. A pair of charmingly beautiful clear eyes that flowed with brilliant light and vibrant colors. But there was a separate layer inside her eyes that reflected a grim, determined darkness. It was as dark as an abyss, and it also appeared to be impossible for one to tread into the depths of her heart. Nangong Liuyan's eyes flashed with a trace of playfulness. He arrived at a conclusion. This girl is definitely sinisterly cunning, enjoys plotting against others, likes to hide in secret places from others. And she was a person who would still wear that slight smile even if she killed another person. She was precisely the same as him. It was just too interesting. Although Nangong Liuyan suddenly sensed that he found one of the same type. A wonderful feeling of finding the similar type of person that could only be found after searching everywhere throughout the entire world. This kind of unprecedented feeling he had towards Su Luo made him immediately brim with interest. At the moment, Su Luo suddenly sensed a trace of wrongness. She discovered that there appeared to be a scorching gaze that firmly locked upon her. Su Luo raised her head to scout, only to discover an impeccably handsome youngster reclining atop the tallest parasol tree, with a playful arc that curled at the corner of his mouth. Only to see him dressed in a gorgeous white robe with light phoenix-like eyes that slightly narrowed. He was an unrivaled beauty of the mortal world, and on his face, the curled corners of his mouth evoked a demonic charm. He was reclining against the tree's highest branch, and was supported atop it. The blossoms of pure white translucent snowball gently fluttered about from the snowball tree. That scenery was as romantic as it was beautiful. And at the moment, he resembled a pretty boy who had just came out of a manhwa. His bright eyes were clear and penetrating, as if he clearly understood everything. While his gaze stared fixedly at Su Luo, the corners of his mouth carried a trace of a charmingly wicked smile, and the meaning behind this smiling expression seemed to be rather deep. "See something good?" He opened his mouth and asked, with an expression that seemed to contain pure joy. Although these were merely 3 words, it held a double entendre. He could be referring to this amusing play, or it was possible that he was asking whether his looks were good, or perhaps he was asking about both. Su Luo narrowed her eyes. When did this guy appear? Before or after she came here? She actually did not sense him at all. Was her vigilance too low? Or is it that his martial art cultivation was too high? Since she knew that she was always on guard, it must be that his martial arts were too high. The corner of Su Luo's mouth slowly bent as she coldly replied, "Seen enough?" In regards to a person who had appeared without being invited, but still was calm and unruffled while watching her play, Su Luo possessed a trace of hostility. Surprise flashed in Nangong Liuyan's heart, and his pitch-black inky phoenix eyes met with Su Luo's beautiful eyes. All of a sudden, he discovered that the frequency of the pulsing heartbeat within his chest became a bit faster than its former speed. The corners of his mouth sketched a playful smile. What a treacherously sinister woman! Su Luo slightly raised her eyebrows. Wearing a smile that was not yet a smile, she answered in turn. What a gentlemanly man of high morals! A blossoming laugh came from Nangong Liuyan after hearing Su Luo's retort. It was a gentle and melodic low sound that was demonically charming. No, this king is the same kind of person you are. Su Luo once again sneered at his implication, which also meant that she was sneering at herself. Chapter 6. Winner is king. What a two-faced crafty man. Wait, he referred to himself as this king. So was he a duke? TL. This king equals arrogant way of referring to oneself, but is most commonly used for by high nobles. Come. The demonically enchanting low voice in front of her passed through the side of her ears. Su Luo slightly knitted her brow. Come. If she came after he had told her to come over, wouldn't she lose a lot of face? What's more, the forking branch on that tree barely had any space. Where would she sit if she went over there? Could it be that he wanted her to sit on his lap? But before she reached a conclusion, the scene before her suddenly blurred, her body moved, and in another blink of an eye, She was already atop the tree. Not only that, she was actually settled within the arms of this man she had just met. How could Su Luo possibly let someone else take advantage of her whenever they pleased? She subconsciously lifted her dagger to slice at the other party's artery in the neck. However, Nangong Liuyun's reaction ought to be considered to be quite fast. Su Luo's hand had not even streaked across, and he had already single-handedly forced her hand behind her back. This posture caused Su Luo's well-rounded bosom to stand erect as it impressively bulged and swelled. Su Luo had never expected such a large discrepancy between her martial arts and this guy's. She was right in front of him, but she could not even deal one blow. Nangong Liuyun laughed with unrestrained wickedness. His slender and smooth finger leisurely stroked Su Luo's creaming complexion. His elegantly pink lips lifted into a wicked smile, as it carried a hint of unbridled arrogant air. Girl, the current you is no match for this king. What, do you still want to continue? Nangong Liuyun's rich and low voice carried a trace of wicked charm that was extremely pleasant to hear. Let me go. Su Luo warned in a stern but low voice because in the corner of her eyes, she saw that the approaching people had almost arrived. Girl, we're free and bored, how about we play a game? Nangong Liuyun happily asked in his enchanting low voice as his eyes filled with pure interest. Su Luo cautiously thought about it, and thought that it wouldn't be different from what was happening now. So she coldly nodded. Speak. Then let's gamble on the two in that pond. If they could hide without being discovered, it would be your win. If they cannot avoid discovery, it would be this king's win. How about it? What would be at stake? Su Luo was extremely poor, so she couldn't gamble with money, but she could use a sleight of hand. Winner is king, loser warms the bed. Nangong Liuyun's eyes pricked in extreme interest at his own proposal. Su Luo's expression chilled. She coldly glanced at Nangong Liuyun with an frank expression, as if she was looking at an idiot. Nangong Liuyun looked hurt as he covered his chest and weakly suggested, winner lies down. Loser falls down. Su Luo was completely speechless. Was this man not the least bit ashamed? It's only the first time they've met, all right? It was the first time they have ever spoken. But how could he be so frank? Even she, a modern woman, felt herself blush. This won't do, and that also won't do. Nangong Liuyun languidly fiddled with the hair beside her ear, as he spoke in a calm and composed manner. Could it be that you insist on the winner being king, and the loser becoming queen? If you insist, that is also something not impossible. Su Luo rolled her eyes in displeasure. Become king, become queen. You're not the crown prince, right? Yet you're not worried about the wind of rumors cutting your tongue. Su Luo coldly ridiculed him with a roll of her eyes and bluntly said, is it really that complicated over there? If I win, you'll have to owe me a favor. If I lose, then you'll have to give this king a kiss. Nangong Liuyun quickly answered with not one bit of loss. Why does this man act as if he'll die if he doesn't get to take advantage of me? I seriously want to give him a good thrashing. Su Luo glared and as a result, allowed him to clearly see her rage. His eyes laughed with careless leisure, but at the same time, it contained a kind of incomparable sharpness that he was unable to conceal. This person effortlessly released an air that suppresses another, and exuded an aura of a domineering king. Chapter 7. Then give this king a kiss, okay? Su Luo slowly agreed after quite a long time. Whatever you say, these conditions favored her. Just a mere kiss can't hurt, right? The modern her played around sometimes, so it wasn't as if she wasn't experienced. The current her didn't have anything, and just happened to need a sucker to drop in her door. Thus, the two treacherous male and female with ulterior motives began their first confrontation. Su Jingyu's party hurriedly approached. Su Jingyu was the eldest son of the Su family, born from the first lady with a not-too-shabby innate talent. He was 20 years old, yet was already a third-step expert, a level that most of the younger generation wished to be at. He didn't come alone, but instead brought along a formidable group of people. The spectacle was quite grand. Sushi was mad to the point of no return, but there was no way out of the situation. Fearful of exposing any clue of her being there, she hid her entire body behind the lotus flowers. In her heart, she had already yelled at Su Wan to within an inch of her life. She never expected that Su would one day be put in such a difficult situation. If the one coming was only Su Jingyu, then it was fine. But he just had to bring along His Highness, the Crown Prince, and other sons of various noble families. If she were to go out now, and was seen by them while looking like this, it was guaranteed that not even a quarter of an hour would pass before news of this would spread throughout the entire imperial capital. When that time comes, how could Su ever intermingle with others in the imperial capital? Su furiously glared at Su Wan, and pledged that after she goes out, she would never let this Su Wan bitch get away with it. Su Wan was also mad to the point of being half dead. She too never expected that her luck to take a turn for the worse. The situation before her eyes was taking a turn for the worse, and the people who were coming were increasing by the moment. If they were to be discovered like this, should they say that they were taking a swim? But it was spring, and not even summer. What to do? What exactly should she do? Su Wan's anxiousness was comparable to disorderly ants. Su Luo curled the corner of her mouth into a contemplating smile, as she looked at the entourage of youngsters in bright clothes. This was actually unexpected. She never would have thought that the crowd of people who came over would actually let Su and Su Wan rack their brains, to then stealthily shrink back behind the lotus flowers. Su Luo then understood that the status of those in that group ought to be considerably high. The one at the head ought to be the crown prince. He wore a brocade robe of canary yellow with a soaring dragon on his belt. His eyebrows seemed to be meticulously groomed, and his high-bridged nose was above thin pale lips that were curled up to display an incomparably privileged air of haughtiness. As he wore this unbridled arrogant flair, he appeared to be both cruel and soft. It only took one look to see that his temper was not good. Su Jingyu wore a dark green brocade robe with a crystal jade belt. He had a bright handsome face, sharp eyebrows and starry eyes, but at the moment, his eyebrows were tightly knitted into an unpleased expression. The crown prince bursted into laughter after seeing the small fire. Jingyu, what is your manner doing? Isn't this just playing with fire? This was not limited to just the crown prince. The younger male generation of various noble families that were behind the crown prince also began to laugh immediately afterwards. Because what was before them was a truth that was indeed worthy of being called a joke. Not only that, it only took a glance to clearly see that it was deliberately done on purpose. Where was the fire here? It was clearly a hoax. What was present before their eyes now was just a medium-sized bonfire. It was burning atop a pile of withered grass that was easily combustible, and was covered with a layer of fresh green leaves. It was known to all that if wood was not completely dried in the sun, the plume of smoke would be especially large after a period of ignition. And in doing so, it was obvious that the other party had done this to lure them here. At this time, Su Jingyu also had some suspicions in his heart. The pretty space between his eyebrows opened up as he broke into a smile, and said to the crown prince, "It's probably a servant who accidentally started this." The crown prince stroked his chin as his gaze swept back and forth at the scene before him. "Oh, the general manor's servants are actually this heaven-daringly audacious?" Su Jingyu's heart stopped, and then hurriedly explained, "It could also be the result of my younger sister's playful mischief. Since it is all right now, let's go back. Jingyu is a bit unsure of the homework teacher assigned today, and it just so happens that I could ask Your Highness, the Crown Prince, for a bit of guidance." Chapter 8. The hot lingering breath. Su Jingyu sensed a feeling of wrongness in his heart. This matter was too strange. He had a hunch that if he stayed here any longer, something he wouldn't want to see would occur. The Crown Prince and him both studied at the Imperial Capital's Advanced Institute, and were even in the same department. The two were in the Wind Element department. With that added to Su Jingyu's painstakingly ass-kissing, he and the Crown Prince had become close as a result, and was already in the Crown Prince's clique. The Crown Prince laughed bleakly. To have the impertinence to play this kind of prank in the great general's manner. They truly have a heaven's amount of nerve to do so. Jingyu, you must investigate this closely. The five surrounded the highest tree's forking branch, as the lush vegetation hid Su Luo and Nangong Lian's figures. The two's breathing were extremely light, so they had not discovered them yet. Suddenly, Su Luo felt warmth at her nape. a hot lingering breath near the edge of her earlobe. Before she had time to react, Nangong Liuyan's low voice playfully asked, "Do you want to see an even more marvelous scene?" "Oh." Su Luo shifted her body forward and looked up at him from a distance as she turned her head around to look at his shiny glittering eyes that glinted with resplendent starlight. His phoenix-like eyes now resembled the luster of seawater, calm and serene. The delicate skin on his face was as beautiful as porcelain china. It was as if he was one of Shangri-La's exiled immortals, allowed to look at, but not allowed to be trifled with. Nangong Liuyan sized up the girl before his eyes at a close range. Bright eyes, white teeth, creamy white skin. A small face without any makeup that could defeat one that wore it. Looks as if she was the morning dew of spring's sunshine, and was a refreshing person. Especially those eyes that contained a stream of sparkling water. When her beautiful eyes wandered, they brimmed with a touching vividness. Her eyes were clear and indifferent while her expression had an even more prominent apathy to it. The corner of her mouth was curled into a cold arc like a white cloud that had transformed into misty nothingness. She was like the calm tide without the slightest ripple or wave. A thought suddenly flashed in Nangong Liuyan's mind. If I smashed this deep tranquility in her eyes, wouldn't that be quite amusing? All of a sudden, he raised his strong and powerful slender arm, and used the other white and smooth finger to lift Su Luo's pointy chin, as the thick shadow of vegetation covered Su Luo. And it was at this critical moment that Su Luo used a mere palm to separate his and her lips. "The game's outcome has not been decided yet. Why are you so anxious?" With a smile that was not yet a smile, Su Luo took a sidelong glance before asking that in a low voice. "Outcome? That would only take a thought." The edge of Nangong Liuyan's pink lips perked up into a playful smiling expression. He slightly raised his dense sword-like eyebrows and stopped moving. Suddenly, a screech came from not too far away. At this moment, the Crown Prince and Su Jingyu had already turned around. But they had only walked a few steps before hearing a sharp, painful shout from the Lotus Pond area that momentarily stopped every one of their footsteps. Su Luo was puzzled. She looked into the distance and saw a clear vision of fresh blood on Su Wan's forehead. She couldn't help but be stupefied in place for a moment. Afterwards, she turned to glare at Nangong Liuyan as she gritted her teeth in extreme anger with a pause in each word. "You cheat. Ted. Was there a rule that said we can't cheat?" Nangong Liuyan started to shamelessly act dumb. Su Luo helplessly rolled her eyes at Nangong Liuyan, but the guy actually let out a resplendent light laugh. The handsome face that was beautiful beyond compare was similar to a queen of the night in full bloom, an alluring rare sight. The Su Wan who had been hit by a pebble subconsciously screamed out loud. She covered her bleeding head as her entire body almost jumped up from the shock. "She's seriously a pig. And was the most stupid one too." She was so angry that she wished she could slap this third elder sister, who had attracted trouble after trouble to her, to death. She originally believed that today's misfortunes had been enough, but never expected that the god of bad luck would still be so kind to her. "Who's there?" Su Jingyu asked in a loud voice towards the empty lotus pond. Chapter 9. The game's outcome has yet to be decided. The Crown Prince revealed a face full of wonder, and appeared to have an extreme interest in this matter. He stared unblinkingly at the lotus pond with sparkling eyes. "Come out. If you don't come out, I'll attack." Su Jingyu stood in front of the Crown Prince to protect him, ready to attack the enemy at any time. As expected, this kind of action gained a favorable impression from the Crown Prince. He patted Su Jingyu on the shoulder, indicating that he could deal with this by himself. Inside the lotus pond, at the moment, Sushi was at a complete loss. If she came out now in front of the Crown Prince, she would lose too much face. She had coveted the title of Crown Princess for a very long time. If she came out now, she would never possess it. Fine. Since this disaster had been caused by third sister, then she'll have to personally go settle this herself. After they leave, remember to give me that cloak, or else I'll beat you to death. After being in the water for so long, Sushi's lips somewhat trembled. After saying that, she lifted Su Wan's belt and tossed her ashore. Su Wan's was similar to a dying pig's screech. She carried water droplets on her body as she flew across the sky in an arc, until finally falling to the ground with a bang. Her jade body laid in a disarray on the bank, as she completely wet the ground's soil. What was even more unfortunate was that her belt had been pulled out by Su Shi. She was originally relaxed, but now that she had encountered such a loss and landed on the ground for a period of time, her belt dispersed as the front of her clothes immediately opened, to suddenly reveal the bright red undergarments inside her clothing and her slender jade legs. The undergarment that covered her chest was opened wide in exposure, as the jade peaks of her bosom's mountains became faintly discernible and invited crime. Su Jingyu's eyes were wide open. It was simple unbelievable. His mouth was opened so wide that even an hen's egg could be stuffed in. No matter what, he never would have expected why his third younger sister would suddenly appear on the bank, and would even appear in such a humiliating way. What's more, she appeared like this in front of the crown prince. Could it be that she was expressing her feelings of affection for the crown prince this way? This is simply just too shameless. Blue veins popped up on Su Jingyu's forehead. He took off his outer clothing and tossed it onto Su Wan's body, and covered up that shameless body as he roared coldly. Why haven't you gotten up yet? He felt like he had never lost this much face in front of the crown prince before, and now he felt like his face had combusted. Unfortunately, Su Wan did not answer his words. She still laid in the same place in front of everyone as they stood in a circle and watched, because at the moment, Su Wan had already fainted. Your Highness, my younger sister's mischief has stirred up trouble, and has accidentally offended you. By all means, please do not be offended. Su Jingyu gnawed his back teeth, and forced himself to adopt a rigid smiling expression, as he tried to mediate the situation. He said that on one side, as he gestured at his servants to hurriedly carry his third younger sister on the other. The crown prince heartily laughed, and appeared to be in a joyful mood. He clapped Su Jingyu on the shoulder like an older brother and smiled. That was your family's astonishingly gifted little sister? The way she came out was quite special. The crown prince had actually seen Su Shi before, but because Su Wan had been flung up, her face had been covered with disheveled hair. Since she had crawled up like a water ghost, the crown prince had not distinctively seen her face before Su Jingyu covered Su Wan's face with his robe. So the crown prince did not actually see which Su Manor's young miss it was. But the words the crown prince had said had their own intentions. The words the crown prince had said made Su Shi, who was in the lotus pond, become so depressed that she raged with fire. She angrily stomped her foot in the water. What's wrong with the crown prince's eyes? That was obviously third elder sister, all right. How could it be her, Su Shi? Even though she was secretly happy that the crown prince had remembered her, how could she forgive that he had mistaken that sorry of a figure for her? Chapter 10. What an awesome big brother. Su Shi really wanted to jump over there and loudly announce that it wasn't her. But under these circumstances, she had no other choice but to remain hidden behind the lotus flowers. But she still had an awesome big brother. Seeing that his most precious little sister had been misunderstood, he hurriedly laughed and explained, Crown Prince, Your Highness, the one there a moment ago wasn't my fifth younger sister. My fifth younger sister is gentle and ladylike, with an extraordinary innate talent. She doesn't even have enough time to cultivate, so how could she be mischievous enough to cause trouble? A peculiar light flashed through the crown prince's eyes. Oh? Then who that was the one earlier? Su Jingyu was at a loss. He secretly scolded himself for being a dumbass. Why did he say that it was one of his family's sisters, and not just randomly blame one of the servant girls? Now that the crown prince is looking into the matter, how was he going to respond? Father always regarded third sister highly. Not only that, third sister was always close with his mother and sister. If it was possible to not sacrifice her, he mustn't offer her up to be slaughtered. All of a sudden, a bright light sparked in Su Jingyu's mind as he realized a way in which he could get the best of both worlds. Due to his emotional excitement, he slightly raised his voice. Actually, I won't keep your highness in the dark, that girl is in fact. Actually, you talk and break off again, as if you're unwilling to speak the truth. Don't tell me that girl is actually. The crown prince's deep abyssal eyes flickered as his voice lowered, and appeared to carry some sort of suggestion. Yes, your highness is brilliant. That girl is in fact my good-for-nothing fourth sister. After Su Jingyu said those words, he immediately relaxed and felt as if the sky had brightened. Even the gently blowing wind had a fresh and clean smell to it. Fourth sister? The Su Luo who sat atop the forking branch seriously wanted to explode and burst into obscene language. Her rigid elder brother, who was supposed to be a person of high morals, was actually this shameless. To actually blame this on an innocent, dragged her into it, and made her a scapegoat, and even said that the scandalous person was actually her. Now she finally understood where her notorious reputation came from. As long as any one of the sisters made an error, they would tell outsiders that it was her fault and fasten the culprit hat on top of her head. Su Luo's eyes glittered with frost and snow. They were infused with a deep cold radiance. Good, very good. Su Jingyu, you have been put into memory by this lady. This lady here is extremely petty. As for this vengeance, just you wait. Nangong Luyan looked at the girl's flickering complexion in amusement as his rosy red lips perked up into a smile. His abnormally enchanting low voice carried a hint of sensuality. Girl, you're not going out there to clear up the misunderstanding? If I go out now, that big brother of mine would certainly be startled, then dismiss me as if I was a servant girl. Would you believe that? Su Luo's smile was as beautiful as a flower, while her white teeth glinted with a cold radiance. But if you don't go out, this crown princess position of yours would never be considered. Would you believe that? Nangong Liuyan's red lips were the color of blood. It was a bright, dazzling color. His eyes, clear and deep eyes, could directly penetrate one's heart. Crown princess? Su Luo went deep into thought, and finally discovered the truth from the memory of the former owner of this body. It was actually real, because it had been said that the original Su Luo was the reincarnation of a bird god. As a result, the empress engaged her to the crown prince. After all these years, even if her reputation was so poor that the wedding contract was so shaky that it was about to collapse, it still had not yet been officially terminated. So Su Jingyu's lie, which framed her in front of the crown prince, first brushed away any suspicions about Su Shi and Su Wan's involvement on one hand, second, settled the difficult problem the crown prince raised, and third, naturally helped his precious sister in opening a path to her future. Because only when Su Luo made way on that road would Su Shi have the chance to become crown princess. Su Jingyu, tell me, what am I going to do with you? Chapter 11, He's Prince Jean. Even though I really don't like the method you used, the triggered results are pleasing to me. She seriously had no interest in being this prince's crown princess. If you really want to compare, although this self-proclaimed prince standing before my eyes is devilish, strong, overbearing, rude, and enjoys taking advantage of a situation, he still gave Su Luo a better impression than the crown prince. Poor girl, you're about to become the sacrificial lamb. Nangong Luyan pretended to be sympathetic as he tapped Su Luo's delicate pink nose. Although he remained expressionless, a smile of satisfaction flashed across his eyes. Do you need a friendly reminder? The corners of Su Lu's mouth curled with a smile that wasn't quite a smile. The person you are currently holding is your future sister-in-law. Wrong. Nangong Liuyan's eyes shone brightly as he slightly exposed his white teeth. The person this king is holding is my future princess consort. Su Luo silently looked to the sky. Such a flat joke. It's not even a little bit funny. She was the legendary good-for-nothing from the rumors, and was born from a concubine. Furthermore, her position of the crown prince's fiancée was on the verge of being withdrawn. How could this lowly prince dare marry her? Up until now, Su Luo still did not know the powerful background of the man holding her. She still thought that Nangong Luyan was one of those little lords. Let's not talk about the heated exchange between the two in front of the lotus pond. After the crown prince discovered the truth, that Su Luo was that shameless girl, his whole demeanor brightened as his eyes flashed. Having learned this truth, nothing else mattered. The crown prince happily left, taking the good news with him. With a wave of his sleeves, not even his shadow was left. The people in front of the lotus pond had already left. A gentle breeze made ripples on the water's surface. In the lotus pond stood a shivering Miss Su Shi. waiting from afternoon till dusk, then from dusk to nightfall. She waited until her face became pale, lips turned purple, but her third sister still did not come to bring her clothing. Poor she did not know that when she pushed Su Wan, she used too much force, and thus knocked Su Wan out into a dead faint. She in the lotus pond becomes so angry that she almost starts stomping her feet. In her heart she started to hate Su Wan. She silently vowed that after she goes back she will not let Su Wan off. Waiting until the night became completely black, using the cover of darkness, she finally jumped out of the lotus pond and onto the ground. Suddenly, nearby a blood-curdling scream cried, "Ghost!" Following the sound of the scream, she slowly turned her head toward the sound, her face hideously distorted, eyes crimson from anger. She had been picked on enough for today. She turned around and was about to unleash her anger at the luckless footman when she realized that the footman had already passed out after being scared silly by the ghost. Now with no way to unleash her frustration, she turned her eyes away and used the cover of the darkness to quickly flee toward her courtyard, the remotest small courtyard in Su Manor. Su Luo had a sliver of grass in her mouth, with both hands behind her head, as she laid on the roof with both feet propped up. Giving off a leisurely relaxed impression, she leisurely reviewed what happened this morning. When thinking about how both Shi and Su Wan was embarrassed, she became happy. Thinking about future fights and grievances between the two made her even happier. While thinking, suddenly an unparalleled face flashed across Su Luo's, musing especially that pair of bewitching eyes, black as ink, with bright light shining from the obsidian iris full of pride. Although his laugh seemed to be careless, it hid the strength and majesty of an eagle, compelling, disdainful yet at the same time, gave off a strong domineering attitude. She described the guy to Lu Luo, who immediately becomes so excited that the bowl in her hand started to shake. She excitedly said, "Mistress, if my guess isn't wrong, then the one you meet is His Highness Prince Jean." "Yes, it must be Prince Jean." Chapter 12. Submit to me and prosper or oppose me and perish. Is Prince Jean really famous? Su Luo asked. Even her body's previous spirit didn't know much about Prince Jean. Of course Prince Jean is famous. In this world there is no one more famous than Prince Jean. It is said that Prince Jean's talent is #1 on the continent, and in the last 5,000 years, his talent is ranked second. Miss, what do you say? Listed as #2 in the last 5,000 years? Isn't it too exaggerated? Obviously it's not only because of this. Right now Prince Jean is a tri-elemental mage. 3 elements. Most people don't even have 1 element, but Prince Jean is cultivating all 3 elements at the same time. Lu Luo's face was full of worship. With starstruck eyes she continued, "It has been said that tri-elemental mages have many opportunity to achieve divinity. The #1 talent had long ago achieved divinity and obtained eternal life. Prince Jean Nangong Luyan, is that powerful? If that was true, then winner becomes king, loser becomes queen, is not something he would careless throw around. With his talent, it wouldn't be hard for him to steal the throne." While Su Luo was still engrossed in these thoughts, a magnified face suddenly appeared before her eyes. The narrow and elegant face, under the perfectly shaped eyebrows with a pair of black godlike eyes, looked like the work of a master sculptor. She recently saw this perfect face this afternoon, so she could not have mistaken this person. Unless this was an illusion? Su Luo was thinking about using her hands to rub her eyes, but a large pair of hands grabbed hold of her delicate hands. Nangong Luyan's pair of obsidian eyes observed Su Luo, with a hint of mysterious smile. "What, do you not recognize this king? Nangan Luyan? Sure enough, this king is already in your heart, otherwise you would not impatiently inquire about this king. Am I right?" Nangong Luyan's thin masculine red lips bent into a silly smile. Su Luo stared at him unblinkingly as she stressed each sentence. It is said that Nangong Luyan is coldly arrogant, haughty, cruel, stern, and obsessive about maintaining his personal space. If anyone touches his hand, no matter who it is, he will cut off their hand. If someone accidentally bumped into him, no matter whom, he would make mincemeat out of them. Are you really that Prince Jean? Su Luo's gorgeous eyes gazed at the large hand holding her own. Her voice was crystal clear as the corners of her mouth tilted into a relaxed smile. Nangong Luyan leisurely glanced at Su Luo with a pair of piercing eyes that glowed like the eyes of a wild wolf, frigid and searing. At the moment, he was unlike the lazy laid-back person from the afternoon. Now he seemed more serious and vigilant. At this moment, a gust of freezing wind started to surround the courtyard all the way up to the roof. This wind seemed to condense the surrounding air into ice and made it hard for people to breathe. His forbidding atmosphere containing a barely suppressed killing intent, chilling bloodthirsty, and a submit to me and prosper, or oppose me and perish kind of domineering air. It seemed like if he stamped his foot, this entire Eastern Ling Empire would be shaken by a level 3 earthquake. Under his forceful and domineering gaze, Su Luo's gaze was as clear as water. Its surface was as calm as ice, placid, tranquil and composed. Suddenly, his mouth curved into a bemused expression, and then the weather immediately changed from hazy frost to clear blue skies. The ice seemed to melt into bubbling spring water full of blooming flowers. Nangong Liuyan's laugh was like the cherry blossoms in March, gentle, beautiful and intoxicating. His smooth white hands gently held her delicate jade-like hands as he smiled tenderly. "Girl, what are you afraid of? It's not as if this king is going to eat you." In this staring contest of clashing wills, no one was able to get the upper hand in this silent war. Nangong Luyan was pleasantly surprised by this result. He thought that he had perhaps accidentally discovered a rare pearl, or a jadeite within a pile of rocks. Chapter 13. Her heart went be-thump be-thump. Su Luo wanted to retract her hand, but Nangong Luyan was far too strong. The more she struggled, the stronger he gripped her hands. "What do you want?" Su Luo exasperatingly asked. In this contest of strength, she could only helplessly admit defeat. "I'm here to collect on the bet." "Girl, are you conveniently pretending to be forgetful?" "What bet?" Su Luo's eyes glazed over and looked slightly confused. "Girl, are you deliberately lying to me? What about this afternoon's bet?" Nangong Luyan said in an indulgent tone. Su Luo coldly threw him a glance and lightly said, "Su Wan was discovered while Su Shi safely escaped detection. So in regards to this afternoon's bet, there is no winner or loser. We are even." Who knew that Nangong Luyan would stick out his slender forefinger and started to firmly shake it in front of Su Luo's eyes while laughing evilly. "No, it's more correct to say that you beat this king and this king beat you." After saying this, he indulgently rubbed her hair. "You are purposefully being unreasonable. No one would interpret the result of the bet that way." Su Luo angrily responded. "In the beginning, you didn't say that we can't interpret the result of the bet this way." In actuality, the one being unreasonable really was Prince Jean. Su Luo tried to suppress her anger. This ruthlessly cunning fox, if he was living in modern era, how many people would be trapped by him? "Be good, come here." Prince Jean beckoned with his elegant slender fingers. She wasn't a little dog. Su Luo calmly crossed her chest, as her lips began to curve up into a faint smile. As Prince Jean watched her actions, he raised his beautiful eyebrows. A pair of dark eyes like a bottomless lake fervently gazed at Su Luo. Just when Su Luo was about to frown, she suddenly felt dizzy. When she opened her eyes again, she found that she had already dropped into his arms. Her eyes lifted upwards, and was caught by his pair of alluring eyes. When she met that pair of outrageously gorgeous eyes, her heart suddenly started to skip in be-a-thumps. That pair of outrageously gorgeous eyes was unbelievably calm, and even more unspeakable intense. It was as if the gaze held in for 10,000 years. Su Luo's throat seemed to be blocked. It seemed as if she couldn't say a single word. It took her a while to gather her bearings, and she secretly warned herself about it in her heart. Prince Jean leaned forward. His hot breath lingered around her sensitive earlobe, as his pair of cold falcon-like eyes that contained a hint of mystery started to shine with a dazzling and beautiful light. "What?" Before Su Luo could finish saying, "What are you about to do?" Su Luo felt a shadow move toward her lips. It was aggressive, fast and unstoppable. You. Her lips had been seized by a hot and soft sensation. Su Luo's could only feel her mind going blank, followed by a dizziness. In front of her eyes was a magnified face. This outrageously handsome man was uninhibitedly kissing her with his eyes closed. His strong and overbearing kiss was like an attacking thunderstorm that plundered her mouth. Su Luo tried to resist by attempting to remove his hands, but she was unable to do so. Instead, the opposite occurred. Prince Jin's steel-like grip became even tighter that she almost cried out in pain. The fervent kiss was earth-shattering, overbearing, and intense, but was at the same time tender and gentle. Su Luo almost lost herself for a moment when she melted into his gentle, yet passionate embrace. The lack of oxygen forced her lips open as she gasped for breath. Her eyes were hazy from intoxication. When she finally recovered her mind, the light in her eyes sharpened. Slap! She heavily slapped him across the face. This guy, who does he think he is? How could he forcefully kiss her like this? An angry aura that filled the air came from someplace hidden nearby, but with a casual wave of Prince Jin's hand, the outrage in the air became tranquil. Chapter 14. Staring until the heart grew fearful, Ling Feng clenched both of his fists as he coldly measured up Su Luo, with eyes full of fury, but also a hint of admiration. How precious is the existence of Prince Jin, and how extraordinary was his talent. Su Manor's strongest elder was only a fifth-step expert, but their master Prince Jin is only 18 years old, and was already at the sixth step. From infancy till now, His Highness Prince Jin had never been so ill-treated before. Yet now somebody actually hit him. This good-for-nothing girl without a trace of spiritual power actually dared to be so arrogant and belligerent. Nangong Luyan stretched out his slender fingers to slowly rub the cheek that was slapped as his pair of haughty, frigid falcon-like eyes gave off a threatening air. In the hidden depths of his eyes, there was a diabolical glint that was as smooth as a mirror, unusually cold, and unfathomable when he intensely gazed at her beguilingly. Because of his stare, her heart grew fearful. A sense of panic flashed across Su Luo's heart, but quickly it calmed down. With her head held high and chest out, she met his eyes, refusing to yield. Suddenly, Nangong Luyan's frighteningly handsome countenance changed when his mouth slowly began to tilt up and burst open into a smile similar to a blooming queen of the night. Flirtatious and magnificent. Clap, clap, clap. The crisp sound of applause surrounded her, until Nangong Luyan used his pair of pretty hands to pull Su Luo into his arms with just a tug. Girl, your fierce self-confidence makes it hard for people to figure out how to deal with you. Should this king applaud your courage, or laugh at your stupidity? Nangong Luyan's pair of devilishly enchanting eyes held a hint of frustration. Don't you know that in this country, attacking a fifth-step expert would get you the death penalty? You have already been sentenced to death. Do you understand that? What the heck? She can't protest against being forcefully kissed? What kind of law is this? Why is it so biased for the strong elite? Nangong Luyan seemed to understand her unspoken words and vaguely smiled. In this world that respects the powerful, the fist is law. It's not fair, right? But who told you to be a good-for-nothing? Su Luo clenched her fists, unwilling to let go. Nangong Luyan gave her a harsh lesson in reality, gave her a clear understanding that in this world, only a powerful fist would allow someone to have the right to speak. Nangong Luyan slightly narrowed his eyes. His nefariously alluring eyes scanned Su Luo from top to bottom. Then he stroked her hand and touched her head. What are you doing? Did he think that she was a doll? Under the moonlight, Nangong Luyan's pair of beautiful ink-black irises held a hint of mystery. He suddenly stood up, pulled on Su Luo's hands and charmingly said, "Let's go, I'm going to take you somewhere." Where? Su Luo looked at him with a perplexed expression. At this moment, his eyes shone brightly with traces of flickering excitement. It was almost like he had suddenly found an explanation to something he was puzzling over. The spirit testing temple. Nangong Luyan swiped aside a fine silken strand of black hair from her forehead. His perfect jawline was clearly distinct, while his charming voice forcefully compelled her, making it impossible to refuse. The spirit testing temple? What are we going to do there? Su Luo knew this place, because that day when she received her results from the spirit testing temple was when her life had drastically changed. What do you think people do at the spirit testing temple? Nangong Luyan suddenly released the sound of a warm chuckle. His voice was friendly and relaxed. The sound was extremely beautiful, especially in the silence of the night sky. But doesn't the spirit temple only allow people to enter on the first of the month? Nangong Luyan playfully chuckled a few times. While poking at her smooth forehead, he indulgently said, "Silly girl, you must get used to the fact that some people, like this king, were born to receive such privileged treatment." Chapter 15. The good-for-nothing is actually a super genius. 1. His jet-black hair poured down his back in silken threads, in an indescribably stunning way. His tall, well-defined stature was elegant, and his slender body carried such noble bearing. Dressed in loose robes that gracefully danced in the air, while the jade belt around his waist fluttered along with the wind, it was as if he was floating like an immortal. His eyes filled with confidence and arrogance, as he emitted the noble and domineering air of a towering aloof god, while his entire body exuded a brilliant light that dazzles the eyes. It seems as if just by standing there, he could control the entire world, with its majestic mountains and endless rivers, in the palm of his hand. "Why are you taking me there?" Su Luo mumbled. She always believed that the motive behind the seemingly innocent courting behavior was used to either rob or rape. She was always wary of such behavior. "Didn't you always want to go?" Prince Jean sucked on his crimson lips, as his charming nefarious eyes drew her in. "This king has already collected his bet. You don't want to collect yours?" At this moment, Su Luo recalled that she could still suggest a condition. So she may as well participate in this game of words, since it's not as if she was the one who put forth that condition out loud, right? "Let's go." Before Nangong Luyan finished speaking, he had already hugged Su Luo to his chest. His body seemed to grow wings as he rapidly flight through the air, almost as if his foot never touched the ground. He was like a dragonfly skimming the water's surface that only left a reflection. The wind rushed by her ears. Su Luo became curious and decided to open her eyes. She saw the passing scenery while flying through the air. Looking downwards, it seemed as if she could see the entire capital. Not afraid. While effortlessly carrying her in the sky, Nangong Luyan could actually talk smoothly without gasping for breath. Evidently, the level of his martial arts was high enough to be at an unfathomable peak, and unfathomable enough to be bottomless. "I like it." Su Luo truly enjoyed this kind of soaring across the horizon type of feeling. It was as if she could see every living thing in her vision as she looked down. She took a deep breath as her hand balled into a tight fist. Unfortunately, she was a natural good-for-nothing, doomed to be unable to achieve the same height as Nangong Luyan. It seemed as if Nangong Luyan could understood her silent wishful thoughts when he charmingly smiled and spoke with his enchantingly deep voice. "Once the test results are out, who says there wouldn't be a reversal in the outcome?" If only. Su Luo secretly encouraged herself in her heart. In the distance, the outline of the temple could finally be spotted. The temple was established at the very core of the imperial capital, and its location was even more orderly than the imperial palace. From top to bottom, one could only see sharp-pointed roofs, a wide plaza with a fountain at the center, and in front of the fountain were rows of master-ranked sculpted statues. Tiger, leopard, jackal, wolf. Even the continent's magic beast sculptures could also be found here. "We're here." Nangong Luyan gently floated down with Su Luo, and the two directly landed in front of the temple's entrance. Nangong Luyan didn't even need to show his title plate, because the elderly gatekeeper had already respectfully saluted him before concentrating on opening the temple gates. In accordance to what Nangong Luyan had said, his face was the best nameplate. He led Su Luo into the hall on the third floor. The first floor was where commoners were assessed. The second floor was where military officials were tested. And those who could enter the third floor were extremely few, for only members of the imperial family were entitled to enter there. The third floor's lights shone with a mysteriousness feeling. It was rich and luxurious, exquisite and beautiful, with a huge jade table in the center of the wide hall. And atop of the table was a crystal ball merely the size of a grapefruit. The crystal ball flickered with sparkling fluorescence. It was clear, translucent, and its brightness was similar to an eye's, as if it was able to reflect the deepest part of a person's heart. Innate spiritual strength was separated into 7 different colors: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple. Red was the weakest and purple was the strongest. Since the beginning of the continent's history, it was so rare to possess purple-colored innate talent that you could count them using your fingers, and it probably only happened once every several hundred years. Chapter 16. The good-for-nothing is actually a super genius. 2. And it was from a person's innate spiritual strength. Could one see how far he was capable of reaching, and how high his potential was in this world that worships the strong? Which was why the innate talent examination often decided a person's destined fate. "Put your hand on the crystal ball," said Nangong Luoyan to Su Luo. Su Luo took a deep breath, then determinedly stepped forward, and slowly put her hand onto the crystal ball. She's already the legendary good-for-nothing with 0 innate spiritual strength, so it's not like there would be an even worse outcome, right? If she still didn't have it, there's no reason at all for her to be disappointed. The crystal ball's radiance was similar to that of translucent spring water, and its radiance even allowed nervous people to calm down. Close your eyes and don't think of anything. Just go find the spiritual energy residing inside yourself. Nangong Liuyan's deep voice was as gentle as the slowly flowing stream of water from a little brook that gives her a sort of delightful feeling. Su Luo nodded her head as her expression became calm and peaceful. She entered into a different kind of unconsciousness. Behind the crystal ball were 7 crystal pillars that were roughly around 10 meters tall, and as clear as water located in a lake, where the bottom can be seen. At the moment, they were devoid of any colorful pigments, but if someone's innate spiritual strength was high enough, these crystal pillars would begin to change color starting from the first. The colors on the 7 crystal pillars were separated into red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple. Only when the first red-colored pillar was completely filled would the second orange color begin to show. At the moment, Su Luo felt her spiritual energy flowing out of her palm like the rushing tides. The crystal ball began to glow and even became more and more radiant, more and more dazzling, and was so bright that it almost pained one's eyes. Nangong Luoyan simply stood by Su Luo, and his eyes froze for only a moment. Suddenly a blazing red ray of light hit the first crystal pillar. In less than a second's worth of time, the first crystal pillar whooshed, and was already filled with red-colored spiritual energy. The second pillar also whooshed, and was completely filled. Nangong Luoyan was originally standing in a relaxed position with his arms across his chest, while wearing a mysterious smile, but now, his posture somewhat faltered as he became stunned at the unceasingly brilliant colored pillars. Wasn't this speed a bit too fast? Based on Nangong Luoyan's former knowledge, even if your innate talent was extremely good, this crystal pillar will still continue to be filled at the speed of a little brook, slow and unhurried. He had never before seen the immediate whooshing he was seeing now that was like a rocket's lift off into space. Red, orange, yellow, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In less than a minute, Su Luo had already passed through 3 crystal pillars. Furthermore, judging by her face that wasn't red from panting for breath, she had not even reached her limit. Nangong Luoyan stood still and stared at the girl in the midst of the dazzling aurora of brilliant light, as his eyes revealed a hint of odd fascination. Currently, her body was enveloped by a layer of pure brilliance. Her long, jet-black hair glittered with a glossy luster, and seemed as if it would break the delicate skin that resembled beautiful porcelain chinaware. She calmly stood there for a long time, wearing a content smile as she radiated brilliant rays of light like spring morning's dew, refreshing and moving. She was so enchanting that it seemed as if she stole a person's soul, thus holding their gaze. An enthralled Su Luo was completely unaware of Nangong Luoyan's thoughts, and was also completely unaware of the fact that her innate talent had flabbergasted Nangong Luoyan to such an extreme extent. At this time, she was still unceasingly releasing her spiritual energy. Green, the green-colored crystal pillar, had also become completely full. It was as if the spiritual energy could not be stopped, for it quickly climbed up to the cyan pillar. Chapter 17. The good-for-nothing is actually a super genius. 3. Effortlessly crossing to cyan. Although the speed of the transformation started to slow down, there was no indication that it would stop. Blue. Nangong Liuyun's gaze fixated on that crystal pillar and watched the slowly turning blue spiritual energy. A thoughtful look flashed across his eyes. To be capable of illuminating blue spiritual energy already implied exceptional talent and outstanding innate spiritual strength. Because even on this continent, very few were able to reach blue-ranked innate spiritual strength. However, what left Nangong Liuyun completely speechless was that her spiritual energy acted like a naughty child. It climbed slowly, but surely while trying to reach the summit, and actually lit up that crystal pillar. The purple-colored crystal pillar in the history of the Eastern Ling Empire. The number of people who lit up that color could be counted on one hand. But this girl Su Luo actually reached purple-colored spiritual energy. Yet this kind of girl had been treated as a good-for-nothing for the past decade. Bullied, abused, and neglected. It was simply a tragic waste of talent. At this moment, if not for Nangong Liuyun's noble upbringing, even he wouldn't be able to hold back the curse words. What happened years ago? Why did such a talented girl get labeled as a good-for-nothing? This matter must be thoroughly investigated. A freezing cold expression flashed across Nangong Liuyun's eyes. 10 minutes, 30 minutes, and 1 hour later. The spiritual energy she sent into the crystal ball was like the endless sea. Even after so long, her expression showed no trace of fatigue. In this world that only respected the strong, talent and innate spiritual strength determined everything. Each of these 7 colors represented a person's future levels of success. Purple was subdivided into high class, middle class and low class. Over time, the purple spiritual energy slowly rose past low class to reach middle class, and finally reaching high class. High class purple. Nangong Liuyun's normally serene and unflappable face now carried a dumbfounded expression. Originally he thought that Su Luo reaching blue-colored spiritual energy was not bad. But in the end, she reached purple-colored high class. It was too inconceivable, and that innate talent was so strong to the point of being frightening. However, that purple-colored spiritual energy was still slowly rising and continuing its freakish climb. Its silent climbing speed wouldn't overtake an ant, but he had never heard of this happening in reality. It was getting closer to the summit. However, at this moment the situation suddenly changed. Just when the crystal ball was about to be completely filled, the 7 colored crystal pillars suddenly became black, as if they had crashed, and all the colors dissipated. At this moment, the 7 crystal pillars returned to their original transparently clear color, and not a hint of color was left to be seen. Su Luo suddenly felt a metallic sweet taste in her throat as a stream of blood burst from the corner of her mouth. Luo. Nangong Liuyun seemed like he teleported in front of Su Luo. His speed was as fast as dispersed smoke. He held Su Luo in his bosom, with an anxious and panicked expression. "I'm fine." Su Luo leaned into his embrace and weakly shook her head. What happened earlier? What exactly was the result of the test? Is it still the same good-for-nothing result? After all, she was still concerned about her good-for-nothing innate talent. A crooked smile perked from the corner of Nangong Liuyun's mouth. He playfully tapped her smooth forehead and answered with his low voice. "If you are a good-for-nothing, then everyone under the heavens are idiots." "So, I'm not a good-for-nothing?" Su Luo's mood suddenly became less tense as her electrified gaze looked expectantly toward Nangong Liuyun. Cough, cough. At the moment, Nangong Liuyun didn't know how to break the news to Su Luo. Actually, there might be a little problem with this crystal ball. Chapter 18. Talent to become an apothecarist. What do you mean? Su Luo quizzically asked. Nangong Liuyun also could not tell where the problem surfaced. He gently knocked Su Luo's forehead. "Don't worry, nobody can deny that you are definitely a genius among geniuses. But proving this point may be difficult. Since you have already waited these past 10 years, waiting an extra few days should not matter much. Am I right?" Su Luo determinedly stared at him. Don't tell me that this unexpected withdrawal is a special case? Nangong Luoyan sympathetically gazed at her and solemnly nodded. Su Luo slumped to the floor while holding her head in anguish. Why was her fate this miserable? Let me tell you some good news. Nangong Luoyan couldn't bear to see her like this. So he leaned close to her, grinning with his unique blend of devilish mysterious charm. Speak, Su Luo replied curtly. Your talent really is quite formidable. Did you see the bright ray surrounding you? Do you remember what color it was? Green with a hint of orange? Su Luo unsurely replied. Nangong Luoyu gently rubbed Su Luo's head. His movements were similar to petting a puppy. His mouth held a hint of tenderness that even he didn't realize. Silly girl. Don't you know that the green color represents the wood element while orange color denotes the fire element? You're saying? Correct, you have two elemental attributes and they are wood and fire. A touch of envy appeared in Nangong Luoyun's eyes. A lot of people worship the dual elemental combination of earth and fire. What are you so jealous of? Su Luo asked, perplexed. She already heard from Lu Luo before that the legendary Prince Jin is a tri-elemental practitioner. Then why would he envy her dual elements? Girl, you really don't know how blessed you are. Nangong Luoyan considerately helped her off the floor and resettled her onto a cushioned lounge to the side. To clear up her confusion, he started to explain. If it were any other elements, even having two is nothing special, but the appearance of both wood and fire elements in the same person. Do you know what this means? What? Su Luo blankly stared him. She really knew next to nothing about this world that respected the powerful. When the wood and fire element appear together, it heralds the emergence of apothecary talent. Girl, do you know about apothecaries? Her lost expression looked so adorable that he furtively stroked her little pink cheeks. Su Luo glared at him and indifferently said, Please explain. Nangong Luoyan laughed heartily. People with multiple elements are already rare, but the condition of having dual wood and fire elements to become an apothecarist is even more scarce. Thus, apothecaries are rare existences in this world with extremely exalted status. Take you as an example. If your father knew about your talent, he would utilize everything to support you. Let alone have the courage to bully you. People would even be afraid to criticize you. Apothecaries are that useful. Su Luo tilted her delicate face and carefully asked, Of course, ever heard of the limit-breaking immortal pill? With just one pill, one would be able to break through the bottleneck to reach the next level. Now do you still think apothecaries are useless? Nangong Luoyan gently rubbed her head. Now do you understand how awe-inspiring your talent is? Does your heart feel a little better now? But, Su Luo looked at hands, then glanced at the clear transparent crystal ball. Her spiritual strength was way too weird. Wait for me for 3 days. A rarely seen serious expression appeared on Nangong Luoyan's face, as his ink-black eyes burned with brilliance. I will give you an answer after 3 days. Looks like it is necessary to visit Sinking Sunset Peak. A complex expression flashed across Nangong Luoyan's eyes. Chapter 19. My heart had been broken long ago. The recoil from the crystal ball did not seriously injure Su Luo, but her head felt muddled and would occasionally twitch from pain. However, she did not mention this matter to Nangong Luoyan. After returning to the manor, Su Luo laid on her bed and thought about today's events. The scheme that made Su Wan fall in the water, which also dragged in Su Shi, made the two sisters fight with one another, and made them suffer tremendously. As she drifted into thought, a handsome face suddenly popped up in her mind for no reason at all. An incomparably handsome appearance, extremely high innate talent, extremely strong martial arts, and was even the empire's respected prince. He didn't treat her that badly, and figuratively speaking, Nangong Luoyan wouldn't be that bad of a partner. The corner of Su Luo's mouth unfolded into a faint and bitter smile. So what if Nangong Luoyan was serious about her? Her heart had been broken long ago, and was nearly destroyed. How could she fall in love with another once more? Yun Qi, how are you doing in that world? I had swallowed the dragon ring, so you would never be able to find it, huh? Would Sister Ming forgive you? Without warning, a sparkling teardrop tumbled down her fair delicate face and moistened her cotton pillow. Yun Qi had given her an unprecedented blow and ruthlessly smashed her faithful devotion into pieces. Su Luo knew that if she fell in love with another in this lifetime, and trust another in that way again, that would be a truly difficult feat nighttime. It seemed as if the sky had been wrapped by black armband. As for the time before daybreak, the night sky was at its most darkest of black, as if thick black ink had been spilled on it. The Su Luo who had sunk into deep sleep did not know the speed of how this day arrived so fast. Early morning, the first appearance of the red sun, unhurriedly climbed upwards in the distant eastern sky. As daylight surfaced, the whole sky was tinged in red hues, evidently prophesying a clear and bright day. However, many felt that today was Su Luo's most disastrous day. After having breakfast, Lu Luo suddenly rushed over in an urgent manner, with tears in her eyes and a face full of panic. "Miss, how could you still be so calm and relaxed? Something major has occurred." Due to her rushing here as quick as possible, she gasped for breath. Su Luo poured a cup of water for her and faintly smiled. "Different situations call for different actions. Take your time. Slowly drink this water and then talk." How could Lu Luo possibly have time to drink water? She was so anxious that her forehead was littered with beads of sweat. In a panic she said, "Miss, how could this be a good thing? At dawn, the Crown Prince personally brought men here and said that he wanted to annul your engagement." "Oh, so it's like that?" And she thought something bad had happened. Su Luo calmly poured water for herself and unhurried drank it, as if she was currently sampling the world's most valuable tea. Seeing her calm and collected expression, Lu Luo became angrier. "Miss, hurry up and think of a way. You were originally engaged to the Crown Prince, yet was still bullied to that state. If this engagement was annulled, what would the future hold for you?" Lu Luo still did not know that her former cowardly owner had already been switched with a more stronger soul, and was so worried that she was about to start crying. Su Luo smiled at her and secretly spoke to herself. This marriage thing would sooner or later be annulled. If the Crown Prince doesn't come in to annul the engagement, she would personally go to annul it later on. The Crown Prince wanting to annul the engagement fits well with her plan. So why would she go out to prevent it? At this moment, chaotic footsteps came from outside the door. A middle-aged woman came in, looked down at Su Luo with a disgusted glance and coldly said, "Fourth miss, Madam requests that you go to the main hall. She wants to discuss an important matter with you." This woman was Madam's most efficient nanny, known as Nanny Gui. She was at the second step of the warrior, so she was always aloof, even in front of Su Luo. Just by facial indications alone, it was as if she was the master and Su Luo was the inferior one. Chapter 20. Simply unbelievable. Su Luo coldly smiled. "If I go whenever you tell me to, wouldn't I lose a lot of face?" In Su Luo's impression, this Madame Su is not benevolent. The original soul that inhibited Su Luo's body suffered countless losses at the hands of Madame Su and in Nanny Gui. Nanny Gui coldly smiled and scornfully said, "Fourth miss, you're joking, right?" "This miss never jokes." Su Luo replied, seemingly crossed her arms over her chest, and seemed serious replied. Nanny Gui narrowed her eyes and a vicious light flashed across her eyes. "Since fourth miss does not appreciate my kindness, then this servant will no longer be polite." Although she said she was the servant, there was no trace of respect in her expression, and her actions were even more ruthlessly disrespectful. She casually took a few steps forward and appeared by Su Luo's side. Her strong hands, like those used to catch baby chickens, extended toward Su Luo's throat. Su Luo's eyes contained a frigid light. Even a servant dare to hit her? Looks like Nanny Gui is impatient to die. Right at this time of imminent peril, when the burly hands were about to seize Su Luo as Nanny Gui's eyes flashed with victory, the situation suddenly reversed. HHHH! A miserable scream broke from Nanny Gui's mouth, and she looked as if her right arm was in pain as she covered it. The pain was so fierce that cold sweat started dripping off Nanny Gui's face. Of course Nanny Gui was in extreme pain. Since Su Luo was knowledgeable about human anatomy, when she fought, she directly hit the critical points on Nanny Gui's right arm. Her movements were clean and neat, without a hint of sloppiness. Su Luo crossed her arms across her chest and calmly looked at her with a taunting, cold smile on her face. How do you know? This is impossible. Nanny Gui looked astonished and was obviously aghast. Oh. Su Luo faintly sneered. Nanny Gui painfully took a deep breath. She secretly cried to herself, illusion, it must be an illusion. Fourth Miss is a good-for-nothing who doesn't know any martial arts. How could she possibly beat me? Thinking up to here, Nanny Gui released an evil laugh. Since Fourth Miss refused my polite request unless I force you to, then don't blame this old servant for being impolite. Nanny Gui used her other hand, curved into a steel claw, and reached toward Su Luo's neck. She didn't believe that she could not grasp the weak Fourth Miss, who did not know martial arts, with this method. Suddenly, a black shadow flashed across Nanny Gui's eyes. Su Luo's figure had already disappeared from her line of sight. However, in that short time, Su Luo aimed her foot at Nanny Gui's butt and kicked. It was this exact Buddha Mountain shadowless kick that kicked Su Wan into the lotus pond yesterday. This kick was even more powerful now. It directly sent Nanny Gui into the wall 3 meters away. Afterwards, a loud violent crash resounded. The wall had not been repaired for many years now. Thus, it wasn't very solid. The wall shook violently a few times and did not collapse, but some powdered mud broke from the wall and dropped to the ground. At this time, Nanny Gui had already passed out from hitting the wall. Su Luo's display of power stunned Lu Luo so much that her jaw dropped to the floor. Miss. Lu Luo was so surprised that she could not speak in complete sentences. Looking at the miss who, with one kick, sent Nanny Gui into a dead faint, Lu Luo firmly rubbed her eyes. She still could not believe her eyes. Oh! Su Luo softly sighed. With one hand under her chin, she pondered over how she was going to deal with this old witch. From Su Luo's previous memories, she recalled that these past years, Nanny Gui continuously bullied her. Even worse, she deliberately asked the kitchen to send pig feed for her to eat. When she was sick, instead of giving her medicine, she replaced the medicine with urine. The original Su Luo angrily protested, but Nanny Gui actually used large needles to poke her. This kind of old witch, it's best she dies. Just based on that hit, she should be out cold for a few days. Chapter 21. The long-awaited day. At that moment, Sushi quickly entered into the courtyard from the doorway. Her face brimmed with joy. She was wearing a wide crimson-sleeved flowing fairy top, with a loose grass-green pleated skirt, decorated with misty flowers. Wrapped around her waist was a golden silk belt that blinds the eyes. She was like a freshly blooming lotus, youthfully delicate, lovable and charming. Everything was beautiful except for one small glaring mistake. There were too many gold and silver jewelries on her body. It seemed as if she was wearing all the beautiful jewelry from the jewelry box. It was flamboyant, vulgar and tacky. Today was the day Sushi looked forward to for a long time. Early in the morning, she was excitedly sitting in the main hall, shifted from left to right. But Su Luo still had not arrived. She finally couldn't wait any longer, and personally went looking for Su Luo. She was just about to ridicule Su Luo when she saw Nanny Gui laying on the floor, uncertain if she was dead or alive. An alarmed feeling flashed through her heart. Her wide eyes glared at Su Luo and angrily said, "Nanny Gui kindly come to invite you. What exactly did you do to her?" Su Luo innocently spread her hands. "I didn't touch her at all. But I did kick her with my feet." Sushi didn't hear the deception in Su Luo's words. She wrinkled her eyebrows in displeasure. Then how could she have ended up this way without reason? Sushi angrily asked. In her eyes, her mom's right hand Nanny Gui was obviously more important than this fourth elder sister Su Luo. Su Luo's innocent face, containing an expression of "you ask me, who am I to ask?" gently moved her lips. She thought about it and hesitantly said, "Just when Nanny Gui was walking, she accidentally hit the wall. After that, she fainted. It was really weird." "How is that possible? Fourth sister, when you lie, don't you even write a rough draft?" Sushi sneered again as her shady eyes stared at Su Luo. Su Luo helplessly replied, "Who really knows? Even if you don't believe me, there is nothing I can do." But recently a lot of unlucky things happening in the manor is real. This morning, I heard the servants outside saying that a ghost came out of the lotus pond. They say that the ghost looks ferocious, with a wide bloody mouth. Lotus pond being haunted. These words stabbed at Sushi's heart. Because if it was really haunted, then that ghost was her Sushi. Shut up. As Sushi thought about yesterday's embarrassment, her face started to color with anger. She quickly changed the subject. Okay, since Nanny Gui wants to faint, then let her faint. Quickly, on with me to the main hall to greet the crown prince. Sushi did consider the possibility that Su Luo did the deed, but not even a single trace of battle was in the room. Also Su Luo was a good-for-nothing. How can she possibly be a match for Nanny Gui, who was a second-step warrior? So she directly ruled out the possibility that Su Luo was the attacker. Since it couldn't be explained clearly, then she'll just ignore it and drop it. Sushi allowed no explanation, and dragged Su Luo out with her. She was afraid that Su Luo would run away if she let go. If that happened, then the person who would suffer a loss would be her Sushi. Because breaking off this engagement required Su Luo to be physically present. It required her to hear the imperial decree with her own ears to complete the ceremony. Su Luo coldly turned her head and glanced at Nanny Gui. She originally worked hard for Sushi, but in the end, didn't she just get casually discarded? She wondered how Nanny Gui would feel after waking up and finding out about how Sushi easily abandoning her. Su Manor Main Hall. The main hall was extremely large. The floor was covered in red carpet. There were 2 rows of 8 seats on each side. Each was made from the precious purple fir wood, and gave off a natural, gorgeous, luxurious, and expensive air. The reason why the purple fir wood was expensive was because it only grew in the dark forest, where many magical beasts roamed. Thus, the transportation cost for the wood was prohibitively expensive. Only similarly powerful and wealth families like the Su Manor could extravagantly afford to make furniture out of the wood. Chapter 22. Give you the position of concubine. 1. At this time, a few people were already sitting in the main hall. Sitting at the most honored position was none other than the Crown Prince Su Luo, had encountered yesterday Nangong Liujue. He seemed to like the color yellow. Today he was dressed in a yellow brocade robe, patterned with 6 golden dragons that ferociously bared their fangs and brandished their claws. The crown prince was wearing a flat rectangular crown with 9 tassels. Each tassel was composed of a golden string threaded through with small silver pearls. The light from the tasseled crown revealed a wild, frivolous, and tyrannical face. His lips were puckered as if sucking on something sour, and his nose was hooked like an eagle's beak. His seemingly calm gaze hit a sharp eagle-like deadly edge. From the beginning, his pair of matchless indifferent eyes never glanced at Su Luo. It was as if just glancing at Su Luo would dirty his honorable eyes. Holding a cup of fragrant tea, his posture was elegant and noble. Perfectly composed, he coolly sipped the fragrant tea with a lofty attitude and indifferent demeanor. Sitting beside him at a lower seating was Great General Su Zian. This was the first time Su Luo saw the father of her body's original owner. She only saw a 40-year or so person covered in an ink-colored robe, who had a cold and frigid expression. This person gave off a piercing, imposing, and detached aura, especially his stern eyes that contained an endless harsh chilliness. He turned his severe, imposing face and shouted at Su Luo, "How can you be so lacking in manners? Why aren't you saluting the crown prince?" At this time, Sushi had already sweetly given the proper ceremonial salute to the crown prince. She had already intimately walked to the crown prince's side, affectionately and sweetly saying crown prince brother this and crown prince that. The crown prince lifted his eyes. A dismissing glance landed on Su Luo's face. He indifferently asked, "You are Su Luo?" To be honest, the girl standing in front of him didn't look too bad. Clothed in a white butterfly muslin gown that swept the floor, which showed off her shapely figure, ink-black hair tied with a light purple ribbon, and a few strands of escaped hair playfully draped across her shoulder. Her face, devoid of cosmetics, was so fresh that it was even moving. Su Luo softly replied, "Yes." Her clear voice was calm and collected, cold and agile, with not a single superfluous word. She bravely held the crown prince's gaze with her dark iris that looked like dotted ink. The crown prince slightly frowned, because Su Luo's eyes were too pure and too bright. The gaze that was as pure as water seemed to be like a blinding light that could instantly see through all the secrets hidden in his heart. The crown prince sulked, silently taking her measure, and tightly wrinkled his forehead. As his hands held the teacup, his mouth hooked up into a nefarious sneer. Because of you, this king has been ridiculed for more than 10 years. Tell me, what sort of punishment do you deserve? She never thought that this crown prince would be so unscrupulous and shameless. He was ridiculed by others for more than 10 years. But what did that have to do with her? He even threw all the blame onto her. If it was the past weak and powerless Su Luo, then this matter would have been dropped. But would the current Su Luo suffer such a loss? Obviously not. Su Luo coldly smiled. Then may I ask the crown prince, back then was it Su Manor who pushed for this engagement? Obviously it was your dear queen mother, who saw Su Manor's fourth Mrs. Good Omen, and hastily decided on the engagement, for fear that Su Luo would be stolen by others. If you want to find a culprit to blame, then you should go look for the queen. Why are you looking for me? This is like picking up soft persimmons, and nitpicking it for being soft. Did he really believe that she would not rebel? Su Luo. The color on Su Xian's face began to change as he violently shouted. What's wrong with this girl? She didn't have such courage before, and every time she saw the crown prince, she would be submissive and could barely breath. Now she even dared to talk back to the crown prince? Who give her this right? The crown prince's mouth curved into a cold smile, as a pair of beautiful piercing eyes held a deep iciness and austerity. Shrewish sharp mouth, a crafty and skillfully argued speech, and every word spoken is vulgar and rude. Chapter 23. Give you the position of concubine. 2. Su Luo's laugh was joyful and sunny. Crown Prince is saying that. The Crown Prince is wise with amazing martial arts, speaks with eloquence, distinguished and carefree, never picks on others, never bully the weak, and never use power to oppress the people? How could this subject even compare? The Crown Prince's brow wrinkled slightly as his eyes filled with annoyance and another bone-chilling coldness. He carelessly played with the thumb ring on his finger and shot a smile that was not quite a smile at Su Xian and said, "The great general really did educate a such great daughter. She really knows how to praise this king. This king really admires that." Although his words sounded like praise, those words were like a sharp sword that brutally stabbed toward great General Su's chest. Su Xian's complexion changed as he waved his hands toward Su Luo and angrily thundered, "Why are you not quickly apologizing to the Crown Prince?" Su Luo revealed a terrified expression, and at the same time, looked despondent. She glanced at the raised hand, raised her small palm-sized face, innocently asked, "Father, is daughter's praise of the Crown Prince wrong? Is the Crown Prince not wise with amazing martial arts? Not eloquent in speech? Not distinguished and carefree? Are you implying that the Crown Prince picks on others, bully the weak, and oppress the people?" Su Xian's face darkened a little bit after each sentence Su Luo uttered, until the very end when his face could be described as being covered by a dense black cloud. It could be said that every word Su Luo used, if alone, was correct but put together, it had the opposite meaning. This was Su Luo playing words games. How could Su Xian, a military man, win against her, who was an experienced veteran? At this time, Su Luo snorted in her heart. Break off the engagement? Even though this lady also wants to break off the engagement, this lady is still in a bad mood, because you were the one who mentioned it. You wanted to break this engagement, but do you think it'll just break like that, because you want it to break? Clap. 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 The Crown Prince suddenly stood up, and steadily, step by step, slowly walked to Su Luo's side. His condescending manner, eyes full of nefarious light, looked at her up and down, while carrying an evil and callous atmosphere. A touch of interest suddenly flashed in his gaze. Outside of his expectations, Su Luo indifferently stared back at him. But Su Luo's heart secretly became more alert. This Crown Prince was suspicious and capricious. If she mishandled him, then she will suffer a loss. Ha ha ha, amusing. This is really interesting. The crown prince suddenly started to laugh loudly. He turned toward Su Zian and said, "Great General Su, this king did not speak wrongly. You really did raise an interesting daughter." What could Su Zian possibly say? He could only laugh along with the crown prince. In the end, whatever the crown prince says would always be right. Su Shi and Su Jingyu's expression changed in an instant. What does the crown prince mean? He praised Su Luo as amusing and looked at her with interest. Could it be that this engagement won't be cancelled? Although Su Luo's heart was secretly on guard, she was still confident about her judgment. Regarding the crown prince's feminine and viscous type of person, he was only interested in what benefit him. He would never give up Su Shi, a piece of fat meat that was about to reach his mouth, on account of Su Luo. At this moment, Su Jingyu took a step forward. His tone was a bit gloomy as he said, "Your Highness, the Crown Prince." The Crown Prince waved his hands, revealing that faint half-smile, and that flirtatious threatening, yet matchless handsome countenance. "This king understand your meaning. Rest assured, today this engagement will be cancelled." But he condescendingly said to Su Luo, "You must really want to marry this king, right? This king is not that unreasonable. I can give you a chance right now." Su Luo coldly threw him a glance as she secretly laughed in her heart. The crown prince nobly sat down on the luxurious soft cushion and arrogantly continued, "If you can answer the question asked by this king promises you to give you the position of concubine." Chapter 24. The crown prince unexpectedly can't raise it up if she didn't even care for the position of the crown princess. Why should she care for this false position of a non-existent concubine? In her heart, Su Luo secretly laughed at this crown prince's self-righteousness. She feigned a smile and cast a sidelong glance at the crown prince. "Your Highness the crown prince, since the position of concubine is so precious to you, you can keep it. It cannot be awarded to just anyone, and your subject's daughter is afraid that she can't assume the responsibilities." What an audacious woman! Before the crown prince could speak, the imperial bodyguards at the crown prince's side had already furiously shouted as the tip of their long swords pointed straight at Su Luo's vital point, the throat. As long as the crown prince gave the order, the sword point would, without difficulty, pierce her throat. Su Luo's back was perfectly straight. Her eyes remained cool as she calmly stared at the crown prince, and tauntingly said, "What's wrong? In the presence of so many people, is our wise, good at martial arts, clever and far-sighted crown prince trying to intimidate his subject's daughter? Easy to say but not good to hear." The crown prince was humiliated into anger. He coldly snorted, "Intimidate my subject's daughter? You'd need to be worthy of it first. Since you failed to appreciate my kindness, why should this one give you face?" That said, the crown prince coldly waved his hand and issued an order. Very quickly, a palace eunuch walked forth while holding an imperial edict in his hands, and loudly started to read. "From heaven's mandate, the emperor's imperial order says, the fourth miss of Su family behaves improperly, and was not brought up virtuously. Thus, it is impossible for her to assume the position of the crown princess. This thereby invalidates the engagement set years ago. Henceforth, there is no mutual responsibility for them to participate in this wedding. Please rise." An imperial decree was even more difficult to alter. At this time, it was rare that both Su Luo and Su Shi breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. The crown prince coldly glared at Su Luo, leaned near her ear, clenched his teeth and said in a low voice, "Girl, in the future, do not appear in front of this king." "What?" Su Luo seems to be shocked and scared silly enough to repeat. "Your Highness the crown prince, your reason for breaking off the engagement, it's because it won't raise up?" Once the words left Su Luo's mouth, a deafening silence instantly surrounded the air. Everyone quickly stopped breathing, casted their eyes down, and did not dare to look at the crown prince. But the corner of her eyes and the tip of her eyebrow were unable to conceal her smiling expression that clearly explained everything implied within those words. What a great, clever and eloquent loathsome girl. The crown prince's face looked as if it had been whipped, and was terrifying as dark clouds. It was as if a storm was imminent. This really was nothing more than Su Luo's scheme to slander. It was the so-called open conspiracy. As the name implied, it was to openly, without tricks, arrange a conspiracy. If the crown prince was to punish her, it would clearly show that he was trying to cover it up and thus make it more conspicuous. Was it really because he lacked the confidence and stamina? But if the crown prince did not punish her, he would lose face. No matter what the crown prince did, he did not have any ground to stand on. No matter how he answered, he would not be able to clear up this misunderstanding. It's like yellow mud dropping from inside his pants from the crotch area. Even if it was not poop, it was still considered to be poop. The crown prince's face went from blue to red. He fiercely stared down at Su Luo, until finally, he harshly flinged his sleeves and strode away. Su Jingyu admonished Su Luo with displeasure. Terrible girl. How could you speak like that? How can you speak to the crown prince like that? The crown prince did not punish you because of him being merciful. You should reflect on it. After he finished speaking, Su Jingyu pacified Su Shi with a glance, then quickly followed the departing crown prince. As for what exactly he was trying to pacify, perhaps only he knew. How? How could you? Su Zian unwaveringly glared at Su Luo. He stared at her like he wanted to swallow her whole. How could you be this shameless? Su Luo sneered in her heart. On the surface, her lips were flat, as if she had been wronged. But honorable father, the crown prince he really said that. When the crown prince leaned close to her ear and said something earlier, only the two of them knew what had been said. If the crown prince wanted to deny it, ha ha ha, there's no chance of that now. Chapter 25. Stop indulging in your wild fantasies. Su Zian grinded his teeth. He wanted to be angry, yet he had no grounds to be angry. In this situation on the surface, it seemed as if Su Luo did nothing wrong. She only repeated the words after being scared. But unfortunately, why did the person have to be the crown prince? Su Zian could only mercilessly lecture her. How did your mother educate you every day? Don't you know even a little propriety? You can't even restrain any of your words. It serves you right that the crown prince cancelled the engagement. Su Luo's coldly smiled in her heart. You can't even restrain any of your words? Doesn't that mean he also thought that the crown prince? Su Luo felt that it was hilariously funny. Presumably, this rumor regarding the crown prince would quickly spread everywhere. However, this father's heart was truly biased, He already knew that an engagement with Su Shi would be set up soon after the crown prince broke his engagement with her. What was the point of deliberately putting on an air of the dignified patriarch now? Was he really taking her for a fool? Pretending to have been wronged, Su Luo looked at Su Zian. Father, is it because I don't know propriety that the crown prince doesn't want me? If I learn propriety, then the crown prince will want me? Su Zian's expression suddenly became tense. The reason why the crown prince wanted to cancel the engagement was not only because of this. The other reason was easy to say, but it did not sound good. Su Zian's aged face hardened. He heavily flung his sleeves as his expression became angry due to shame. If you worked harder, how could you have ended up in this position? Who can you blame? What was wrong with this daughter today? The words she said were as cowardly as usual, but these words could actually make him choke. What if my innate spiritual talent now reaches the purple rank? Will father value me then? And would the crown prince still break off the engagement? Su Luo's face had a naive romantic expression. Those vivid eyes seemed to be full of expectations and yearning. Purple rank. It was as if Su Zian had heard the world's biggest joke. He bursted into loud laughter. After a long time, he mockingly scoffed at Su Luo. Do you even know what having purple ranked innate talent means? Not to mention purple rank, just a blue rank, no even cyan. If you really have cyan talent, then your father will personally kneel down before you and pour water for your tea. Speaking of Su Luo's spiritual talent, it was the most humiliating topic for Su Zian. At that time, because of this good-for-nothing Su Luo, he was mocked by his colleagues for half a year. This matter became his nightmare. Even now, when this affair gets mentioned, he couldn't help but feel deep hatred. Su Luo raised her palm-sized small face that looked lovely and pitiful, and weakly asked, But father, if I accidentally become a wood and fire dual elementalist, and also incidentally become an apothecary, would you treat me very well? Wood and fire dual element? Su Zian stared at Su Luo as if observing an idiot. He did not have the heart to laugh at this stupid daughter of his. But she was still quite pitiful to be born a natural good-for-nothing. He could only reply, wood and fire dual element? Luo Luo ah. You really want to become so strong that you became crazy just from thinking about it, right? Do you even know how rare it is for a wood and fire dual element to appear? The reason why our Su family can achieve such a position we have now could be because of your grandfather's C-stabilizing divine needle, but the most important reason was because our Su family had a wood and fire dual element apothecary. Do you understand? Also, about becoming an apothecary, stop indulging in your wild fantasies. Although the apothecary in the Su family was still only an intermediate apothecary, he was still someone that various powerful families were trying, with utmost effort, to win over. The reason why the royal family wanted to woo the Su family was mostly because of the Su family's apothecary. This apothecary was none other than Su Zian's biological older brother. He was infatuated with refining medicine all year round, and worked hard for a few decades, only to finally ascend to become an intermediate apothecary. Chapter 26. I really must thank you. Indulging in wild fantasies? Su Luo's vision fell upon the center of her fair hands. The results of the assessment told her that the talent within these hands were no less inferior than anyone else's. Not only that, it was actually the talent of a genius among geniuses, a kind that rarely appears once every few hundred years. Even though a slight problem had appeared at the moment, but she would definitely find the reason. Her innate talent must not be left buried. She wanted to stand on top of the world, and let those people who trampled over her regret raising their head to look down at her. Seeing the dazed Su Luo, another fit of anger emerged inside Su Zian's heart. This disappointment of a daughter. I seriously suffocate from anger every time I look at her. There is nothing more for you here, leave quickly. This father impatiently waved his hands, like he was chasing off a beggar, and dismissed Su Luo. Oh! Su Luo walked a few steps, then stopped to turn around and stare deeply at her father. Suddenly, a smile manifested on her face, a smile like the sweet and alluring queen of the night that was dazzling to the eye. Honorable father, today you told me to leave, but you must not regret it afterwards. Humph. Father indeed has regrets. Father's deepest regret was that he allowed you, a shameful good-for-nothing, to be born back then. Su Zian did not speak, and it was actually Su Shi who answered. She taunted her by sneering with her lips as she arrogantly raised her chin. Su Shi sneered with a towering arrogance as she observed Su Luo. Her arrogant expression looked as if she had been observing a little ant. Su Luo, it is important to know one's own limits. Since you are the lowest of all losers, then scram and go back to your lowly livelihood that's no different than a dog's. Hurry up and scram. Just seeing you makes me angry. Without the crown prince present, Su Shi's gentle ladylike manners completely disappeared as she exposed her spoiled and unreasonable true nature. Even though Su Shi hurled abusive words at Su Luo and said that she was a dog, Su Zian did not refute a single word. This was sufficient to illustrate where Su Luo's existence in this family placed in his heart. Su Luo did not bother to trade insults with Su Shi. She only took a deep glance at Su Zian, the deep meaning in her eyes fixed onto Su Zian, until his heart grew nervous. Just when Su Zian was about to speak, Su Luo immediately turned around without hesitation. With big strides, she left this coldly indifferent and suffocating place. While walking, she secretly laughed grimly in her heart. Su Zian, since you chose this today, don't even think about borrowing my Su Luo's light in the future. Su Zian was completely unaware of what he had lost after his previous cold apathy towards Su Luo. If he knew that he would be losing a purple-ranked innate spiritual strength genius of a daughter, a wood and fire dual elemental apothecary, perhaps he would regret it until his intestines became greenish-black. Sadly, the world did not have medicine for regret. He used cold detachment and neglect to make this bitter fruit, and he could only personally swallow it himself. In the company of Lu Luo, Su Luo slowly walked out of the main hall. At this time, the sun outside was at its strongest, glaring and dazzling to the eye. Su Luo's face carried a bland smile. The engagement had finally been cancelled. She could also finally release a breath of relief. As for the crown prince's hatred toward her, presumably, the crown prince would be very busy, so he should not have time to look for her. Suddenly, Lu Luo's eyes lit up as she pointed at the side of an underbrush where a dazzling jade pendant laid. "Miss, there's a purple fish jade pendant over there." Lu Luo picked it up and handed it to Su Luo. Su Luo looked at the purple fish jade pendant and felt that it was somewhat familiar. Suddenly, an epiphany flashed within her mind as a sly and narrow smile slowly appeared. Her eyes shined with starlight, and the corner of her mouth also curled into a mysterious smile. "Miss." Lu Luo did not understand. While staring at the purple fish jade pendant, why was her mistress smiling so treacherously? "Good Lu Luo, I really must thank you." Su Luo gave her enormous praise. Chapter 27. 3 days flashed by in an instant. 3 days flashed by in an instant. Tonight was the appointed day Nangong Luyan had promised to meet her. The night was as black as ink. A few remaining stars hung in the desolate sky as they produced a weak radiance. Suddenly, a black shadow appeared through the night sky and approached like the wind. His robe elegantly fluttered, like a beautiful fallen immortal. In a short time, this human shadow quietly landed in the remotest courtyard of the Su Manor. "Come in." Very quickly, an unsurprised clear and cold voice came from the room. When Nangong Luyan entered, he saw Su Luo with a book in hand. She was earnestly reading in the candlelight. Today she wore a white muslin gown. It was simple and plain. It seemed as if she was pure and impervious, but also outstandingly sharp. The hazy candlelight shrouded her body, as if it was covered in a faint layer of radiant mist. She looked blurred, cold and pure as well as noble and faint. Due to her killer instinct, even before the door was pushed open by Nangong Luyan, Su Luo had already detected his presence. While Nangong Luyan, step by step, walked toward her back, it seemed as if Su Luo's had eyes behind her back. She calmly put down the book in her hand and gestured. "Sit." The corner of Nangong Luyan's mouth curled into a devilish enchanting smile. If he sat after being told to sit, wouldn't he be losing face? Thus, Nangong Luyan refused to sit down on the perfectly good chair. Instead, he chose to sit on the tiny space by Su Luo's side and closely squeeze in next to her. "Nangong Luyan, behave. Don't get fresh with me." Su Luo's shapely eyebrows wrinkled slightly. She did not like to be in physical contact with people, so she wanted to push him away, but her hand was stopped in midair, because Nangong Luyan was already using his large hands to wrap it around hers. Men and women were born with a disparity in their physical strength. Su Luo peevishly glared at him, but his face beamed with a cheeky grin. "Don't be so stingy, I'm really worn out." Nangong Luyan's slender and smooth finger hooked onto Su Luo's bright and clean tapered chin. The corner of his mouth was set into a roguish and enchanting smile, as he spoke in a deep and husky voice. "For you, this king could be said to have rushed past 1,000 li, or even traveled 10,000 li, and this is how you compensate this king. TL, li equals Chinese mile equals 5 kilometers. 3 days ago during the test at the spirit testing temple, Su Luo's body had been covered in a mysterious and freakishly abnormal spirit force. At that time, Nangong Luyan left after escorting Su Luo home. He only left behind a few words, that after 3 days, he would come back and give her an explanation. Su Luo knew this matter would be difficult, so she already remembered this favor in her heart. She would definitely return this favor in her own way. With him lifting up her chin, Su Luo's vision coincidentally landed on his face. Suddenly she stared at him blankly. His description of rushing past 1,000 li, and traveling a distance even further that could possibly reach 10,000 li, did not seem to be an exaggeration. The Nangong Luyan from 3 days ago was full of godlike charm, was vibrantly handsome, pretty with extraordinary beauty, leisurely amorous, with incomparable grace. though the him now still was as pretty as before, and was still extraordinarily handsome. He looked completely travel-worn and grimness coated his face. Looking carefully, his lower eyelids had a hint of a blue-green color, and traces of exhaustion could be seen all over his face. Even when exhausted, the depths of his eyes still rippled with devilish charm, and an enchantingly light smile. His obsidian-like eyes glistening with light, and every leisure gesture exuded the highest quality of a king's domineering air. What was also difficult to hide was his extremely refined elegance and charisma. Su Luo's heart was slightly moved. To say that her heart was completely unmoved at this time would obviously be impossible. After all, she was not made out of wood and completely lacked emotion. But to say that it was love would truly be out of the question. In fact, Su Luo had yet to realize how difficult and dangerous this 1,000-li trip Nangong Luyan, made to sinking Sunset Peak, truly was. It was simply beyond what the current her could imagine. But Nangong Luyan still continued to roguishly and enchantingly smile. Not a hint of these hardships could be seen on his face, to the point where Su Luo could not even guess at the real difficulty of this trip. Chapter 28. At this moment, time seemed to have stopped. Su Luo looked at him and raised her eyebrow. Then thank you for your hard work, but I hope you did not labor in vain. While smiling, Nangong Luyan tapped her lovable and charming upright nose. Girl, you're really heartless. This king personally lifted his foot to fish around for information, but your expression is still neither cold nor hot. How can this be allowed? Come give this king a kiss first. While Nangong Liuyu was speaking, he already took the opportunity to lean into her. Not waiting for the touch of his soft lips, Su Luo immediately pushed him away. Nangong Luyan, you are the dignified stately Prince Jin, the rumored legendary outstandingly talented genius. How can you be so shamefully? Aren't you afraid of being made fun of if this were to be leaked out? Silly girl, this king only treats you like this, so how could other people know? Nangong Luyan happily laughed while pinching Su Luo's pink cheeks. This girl's fuming expression was so adorable and so lovable that he had to pinch her again. Su Luo glared at him unhappily. Sit properly, stop trying to touch me. But Nangong Luyan had been running around for 3 days, so he didn't have a chance to get intimately close to her then. How could he so easily let go of such an opportunity? The corner of his mouth hooked into a nefarious smile, as his enticingly enchanting deep and beautiful eyes captivatingly stared at Su Luo. This demon! Su Luo's face had a speechless expression. Suddenly, the corner of her eyes bent slightly as it flashed with cynicism. Nangong Luyan, is it because you didn't find an explanation that you are purposefully trying to distract me? Goading him was really useful. Really clever girls are no fun. Nangong Luyan sighed. Although he did not win an inch while wanting a mile, he also did not plan on releasing Su Luo. He suddenly became serious, looked at Su Luo cautiously, and slowly stressed each word. Girl, tell me, recently do you often get dizzy spells? Su Luo saw a never-before-seen serious expression on his face, and her heart faintly trembled with fear. What's going on? The formerly harmonious smiling expression had now become this deadpan. She was still not used to such an abrupt shift. Su Luo thought about it, nodded her head and answered. Indeed, sometimes I get headaches. Not only that, she would also get very dizzy and sleepy to the point that she really wanted to go sleep. And after falling asleep, it was hard to wake her up. Su Luo suddenly had a feeling that it was as if she might have a serious illness. Does your dantian feel bloated? Does it feel hard when you touch it? Nangong Luyan hastily followed up with another question. TL, dantian. A point below the navel where one's chi/energy pools at. But he had a strange and complicated expression on his face. Su Luo had never seen this earnest and serious concentration on his face. This serious expression also seemed to hold a touch of hope in it. His large hands that were holding Su Luo suddenly tightened. It was sufficient to prove that he was anxious in his heart. Something that could make the legendary Prince Jin anxious to this extent should not be a trivial matter. Then what exactly is happening to her body? Su Luo's heart felt as if it was being pressed down upon by heavy boulders. Suddenly it felt somewhat suffocating. But then she thought about it again. How much worse could it get? She was already a good-for-nothing. At worst, she just won't be able to practice martial arts in the future. Su Luo slowly exhaled her muddy feelings. She calmly looked at him, casually said, "Yes, sometimes I feel bloated. What does that mean?" Previously, she just assumed that her menstrual cycle was about to begin, so she did not pay it too much thought. After all, this body was about 15 years old. Getting her period was normal. But now, it seemed to be clear that they were not related. Momentarily, their surroundings became really quiet. Quiet to the degree that a falling leaf could be heard. At this moment, time seemed to have stopped. Even the surrounding air seemed to contain an apprehensive stiffness. Chapter 29. This king is wholeheartedly willing. Nangong Liuyan's pair of penetrating eyes purposefully watched Su Luo, and did not speak for a long time. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Only after quite some time did he slowly ask another question. "Have you seen a ring before? A ring with an engraved dragon on it?" "Dragon ring?" Su Luo abruptly cried out in surprise. Of course she had seen the dragon ring. How could she forget the dragon ring? In her previous life, the dragon ring was her last assignment. And it was also because of this dragon ring that she could ruthlessly thwart Yun Qi one last time. Back then, when she had been shaking the brocade box in front of Yun Qi, the box actually contained wedding rings. She had personally bought them with the intention of marrying Yun Qi. But unfortunately, Yun Qi had mistaken it for the dragon ring, and carelessly fell into her trap. At the last moment before death, Su Luo swallowed the dragon ring, and immediately jumped off the cliff. Underneath the cliff were the turbulent ocean waves. Even if she died, she would never give Yun Qi the opportunity to obtain the dragon ring. But why did Nangong Liuyan know about the existence of the dragon ring? Enough to even ask about it. Back then, a wealthy guest had spent $3 billion to set up an assignment to look for this ring. What is so wonderful about this ring? Was her spirit traveling through space and time related to the dragon ring? All of a sudden, Su Luo became somewhat perplexed. "You know about the dragon ring?" A complicated emotion flashed within Nangong Liuyan's pupils. His gaze closely watched Su Luo, seemingly afraid to miss any trace of emotion on her face. "Indeed, I have seen it before, so what?" Su Luo's expression had become cautious when she callously replied. But now, if asked to take out the dragon ring, it would be impossible. And even if they dissected her body, they still may not find the dragon ring. After all, the body that swallowed the dragon ring was not this current body. "You have swallowed it before, right?" Nangong Liuyan's expression had a touch of excitement. She never thought that with one phrase, Nangong Liuyan would be able to go straight to the crucial point. But why is he so excited? Su Luo warily looked at him. The corner of her mouth upturned into a smile, her hands linked into her arms, as her pair of liquid eyes held a frosty expression. She could only uneasily smile while observing him, and did not saying a word. "Don't be so nervous, how could I harm you?" Nangong Liuyan playfully squeezed her cheeks. This girl's cheek is pink and tender, with skin that glistened like amber, snowy white with spot of pink. It seemed as if water can be squeezed out. "It really feel good in my hand." Seeing Su Luo's frown, his pair of phoenix eyes brimmed with devilish allure and a charming smile. "Silly girl, what kind of wild things are you imagining?" The dragon ring has spiritual protection. If it is swallowed by the host, and the host did not die from immediate bodily explosion, this means that the dragon ring has already recognized this host as its master. Even if others dissected this master, they still would not get the dragon ring, because the master and the dragon ring would have already merged together. Observing the pleasantly smiling Nangong Liuyan, Su Luo spread out her hands. "Sorry, but being cautious and prudent is part of my nature. It may be hard to change that." Being cautious and prudent is appropriate, and would never need to be changed. Moreover, this king likes your ice-cold indifference that could repel a person 1,000 li away. Nangong Liuyan overindulgently tapped her lovable and charming nose. "Are you deliberately looking to be abused?" Su Luo seemed puzzled. He doesn't want the ones delivered to his doorstep and rather pester her? It's because you did not realize how captivating you are to people, silly girl. Nangong Liuyun's deep black cold pupils exuded a faint luster. He took hold of Su Luo's hand while laughing devilishly and languishly with charm. If you are the one abusing, then this king is wholeheartedly willing. Chapter 30. The Dragon Ring's approval don't change the subject. Su Luo realized that her own thoughts had been steered far from the main topic. She quickly returned to the main topic and continued to question him. How do you know about the Dragon Ring situation? Also, what's happening in my body actually has something to do with the Dragon Ring. It's related, it's strongly related. Nangong Liuyun's gentle voice was also tinted with a hint of roguish charm. He indulgently reclined on the chair and stared at Su Luo like an idling lord. So thirsty. This was clearly getting to the crucial point, and then putting on an air. Su Luo could not stand this guy's behavior and snorted, but her face was overflowing with a smile that became increasing more brilliant. She cheerfully poured boiling water into a decrepit porcelain teacup. I don't have tea leaves, only boiled water. Please make do and drink it. Let whom drink water? Nangong Liuyun crossed his legs while smiling coarsely and charmingly. This stupid arrogant show-off was really hard to wait upon. Su Luo cursed him in her heart, but her smile became even more dazzling. Your Highness Prince Jin, please drink some water. Who would have expected that Nangong Liuyun would be so petty to even bother? He arrogantly waved his hands and childishly tilted his head away, while carrying a tone of dislike. Not intimate enough. This guy. Su Luo grinded her teeth. Her smile became even more dazzling as she stressing each syllable. Nangong Liuyun, will you drink now? Liuyun or Yin? Nangong Liuyun lazily threw out a suggestion. Su Luo's hand folded into fists, and dropped the teacup on the table with a thump. She crossed her hands over her chest and languidly shot him a glance. Finish playing yet? Does he really think that he was her lord? Seeing that Su Luo was no longer cooperating, Nangong Liuyun unexpectedly moved closer with impatience, and happily smiled as he hugged her. This Luo girl is really stingy, not even a bit of fun. Then go find some girl who's fun. Su Luo ignored him, and then turned her head away. How could that be possible? This king will only pester you. Nangong Liuyun's entire face smiled foolishly with a shameless, I won't retaliate when hit and won't retort back when cursed look on his face. Him acting this way made it impossible for Su Luo to get mad. She instantly glanced back and fixedly stared at Nangong Liuyun. Was this really that rumored legendary callous, devilishly charming, powerful, and despotic Prince Jin? Was this really that Nangong Liuyun, who could effortlessly annihilate anything? Was this also the second prince of Eastern Ling, who had developed an advanced stage of misophobia, where a stranger could not get close? Where a light punishment would be a chopped hand, and a heavy punishment where they would become mincemeat. This alluring and devilish charming, lazy and lecherous, all smiles sloppy appearance was truly, that aloof and remote super talented person? This was not logical. Has this guy's soul also been switched? Su Luo speculated, and was unable to stop herself from staring at him. Due to Su Luo's unblinking gaze, Nangong Liuyun's heart became apprehensive. He shivered a little and weakly asked, What do you want to do? I want to dissect you and have a look to see if your soul has been switched. Su Luo sullenly replied, what are you ahang about? Can you start explaining it now? What exactly is the relationship between the dragon ring and what happened to my body? You are not allowed to keep me in suspense. Su Luo, who was always being led by his pace of changing the subject, looked completely at a loss. Nangong Liuyun also felt that he teased her enough for today. If he continued teasing this girl would definitely go ballistic. He moved to Su Luo's side and stared at her with eyes that contained a hint of envy. In fact, speaking of this matter, it is really complicated. There really are stupid people with stupid luck. If comparing luck, under the heavens who could say that their luck was better than Su Luo's? Looking at Su Luo's expectant gaze, Nangong Liuyun mysteriously smiled. Girl, do you even know what the approval of the dragon ring means? Chapter 31. An ordinary man is innocent, but having a cherished item would get him into trouble. What does it mean? As Su Luo raised her palm-sized small face and beautiful eyes that seemed to be filled with sparkling water, it looked very adorable. In fact, she still had not fully grasped an understanding of this world, where only the mighty were respected. She had simply gleaned some knowledge from asking Lu Luo in the past few days. Nangong Liuyan's pair of dark translucent eyes glistened. His lips were dark red and moist. Moreover, its devilish charm and soft attractiveness was as red as the bloody red color of the Japanese rose. He carefully restrained her shoulders and stressed each word. It means that you, Su Luo, in addition to the dual elements of wood and fire, you also possess the space element. Now do you understand? Nangong Liuyan had a face that was practically full of defeat. He had truly been defeated by Su Luo's luck. Space element, huh? How rare was it in this continent? It could be described as extinct. Space element mage? Su Luo was somewhat confused. She looked like a curious doll as she earnestly asked. In this world, wasn't there only 5 major elements? Wood, fire, wind, water, and lightning? How could there be an additional space element? That's because space mages had already disappeared from the continent a few hundred years ago. So later on everybody would just omitted the space element. Thus, what was originally the 6 major elements became the 5 major elements. Nangong Liuyan was speechless. How could a person's luck be so good to such an extent? Innate spiritual talent at the high-class purple rank. Elemental mage of dual attributes. With the great luck of them, being the wood and fire dual elements. Now she could proudly practice to be an apothecary. Moreover, she also was a long-lost mage of the space element. Space element. Just thinking about it would definitely make one drool. Although there were spatial rings still being passed down in this continent, the spatial ring, a storage device, simply could not be compared to a space mage's own space. They were 2 completely different concepts. Spatial ring was only a device for storage, but if one were to talk about a space mage, his space is contained within his body. It would be comparable to making their own world. Additionally, this small world would gradually grow larger along with its owner's cultivation. In the end, nobody could tell to what extent it could become. Another point was that in this world, only space mages were about to produce spatial rings. Since space mages disappeared from the continent, the spatial rings were currently exceptionally expensive. Take Eastern Ling Empire for example. In the entire Eastern Ling Empire, only His Majesty the Emperor had a spatial ring that only had a small area for storage. This was the so-called an ordinary man is innocent, but having a cherished item would get him into trouble. If people were informed that this girl was actually a space mage, in all probability, the continent's numerous powerful forces would act at once upon hearing this news, and vie to be the first to snatch her. And it was not only the well-known and influential forces. There were some hidden aristocratic families who would not be able to resist the temptation of monopolizing her. After all, if they had a space mage, then it would mean the birth of new spatial rings. Although this is a matter further in the future, the thing these aristocratic families do not lack are time and patience. Su Luo literally has a mountain of treasure at her disposal, but was currently powerless to defend it. Fortunately, the only people who are currently aware of this matter were the 2 of them. Nangong Liuyan solemnly said to Su Luo, "Girl, this dragon ring matter, you absolutely cannot let anyone know. Otherwise, even this king would not be able to protect you." Su Luo was an assassin in her previous life, so it was natural for her to know about the complexity of human nature and their greed. She nodded her head and seriously replied, "I will naturally not speak about it. But what is the relationship between the dragon ring and my problem with my wood and fire dual elemental power? The relationship between them is complicated. Simply put, your space element is excessively potent, thus it suppressed your dual elements. So right now there is no way for you to cultivate. Once your space appears, this ought to be resolved." Chapter 32. What a sharp girl. What are the conditions that will make my stupid space appear? Su Luo was extremely confused and anxious. If it does not appear in this lifetime, then doesn't it mean that she couldn't cultivate for her entire lifetime? It looks like disaster and good luck would always go hand in hand. It is impossible for one to repeatedly get good things. Nangong Luyan laughed crookedly. This laugh had a crafty and sinister quality in it. To say that this matter is difficult is not difficult. To say it's easy is not that easy. Stop keeping me in suspense. Su Luo lazily raised her eyebrow. To open your space you must have 3 things. 1 spatial grass. 2 celestial spirit water. And 3 the blood of a dragon. If you collect all 3 items, then you can open your space. Nangong Luyan's deep gaze started to give off a demonic gleam that was dazzlingly beautiful and devilishly charming. Su Luo's fine eyebrows tightened. What are these 3 items? Where can they be found? Where could she, the unfavored daughter of a mistress, find a spatial whatever grass and the blood of a dragon? I have already brought the spatial grass. As for the dragon's blood, there are armored-backed dragons in the Sunset Mountain range. We'll find some time to go slay a dragon. As for this celestial spirit water, Nangong Luyan paused a little as a nefarious and charming smile appeared, enticingly stared at her with a hidden meaning. It is in fact as far away as the end of the earth, yet is also right in front of your eyes. Oh, could it be in Su Manor? Su Luo's curly, thick silky black eyelashes fluttered like butterfly wings. She looked as beautiful and naughty as a fine porcelain doll. She did not even have half a favorable impression of the Su Manor. If really was here, then it would just be simple and convenient. Nangong Luyan's smile seemed to be able to charm all living things. It was enchanting and wild. He looked confident and at ease as he waved a fan. What a smart girl. You hit the mark with 1 guess. The celestial spirit water just happens to be inside your Su Manor, and it's also Su Manor most heavily guarded treasure. If it's actually here, what are we waiting for? There's no time to lose. Su Luo's clear eyes lightly smiled again. Since it's Su Manor's precious treasure, then she won't be impolite and kindly accept it. You're going to find your honored father to ask for it. Nangong Luyan's beautiful pair of eyes harbored a sinister charm. A breeze gently brushed away Su Luo's beautiful jet-black hair, making her seem almost gentle, beautiful, and sweet-tempered. But the expression in her eyes was as incomparably apathetic as before. The words she said matched her expression. Ask for it. How could I ask for it? I'm obviously going to steal it. That's actually not necessary. You can just tell your honorable father that you have wood and fire as dual elements, and is a future space mage. Once he knows that, he'll be happy for you. Then wouldn't the celestial spirit water would be handed to you? Are you seriously stupid, or are you pretending to be stupid? Su Luo hit him without reservation. I don't know if you're actually stupid, but I'm certainly not stupid. My family's honorable father is cold, detached, unkind, and selfish without regard for others. Forget about whether or not he would actually believe my words. So what if he believed them? In his heart, I'm only a tool to be exchanged at for his benefit. As long as someone is wealthy enough to give an offer that can tempt him, he would not hesitate to sell me. Also, Nangong Luyan, don't use this method to incite me. It's meaningless. What a sharp girl. Suddenly, Nangong Luyan's gentle laugh appeared. The sound was kind, indolent, and extremely pleasant to hear. While laughing, he used his fan to gently tap Su Luo's bright forehead. As expected, this girl did not disappoint him. If it was a normal girl who had been bullied for more than 10 years, who woke up one morning to find out that her innate talent was actually extraordinary and peerless under the heavens, the first thing she would do was announce it to the whole world. But Su Luo, she was the same, yet with her kind of unwavering determination and patient nature, he was certain that she would walk very, very far in the distant future. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.